Chapter 145. At that moment, the heavenly auction house, heavens beyond heaven, Shijua mountain, and so on, everything disappeared from Mengqi's eyes. In front of her eyes, Yin Qingyan's handsome features appeared. With every breath she took, she could smell the clean and refreshing scent of his body. She could only hear her own heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. It was getting louder and louder, so loud that it seemed like it was going to rush out of her ears. Her mind instantly went blank. She also knew that Yin Qingyan had asked her a question, but she had no idea what the question was or how to answer it. Mengqi opened her mouth blankly. Yin Qingyan's eyes were so bright. They were too close. Not only could she see his eyelashes, but she could also see the small shadow of herself in his eyes. Mengqi opened her mouth again. It was as if she had returned to when she was very, very young. She could only babble and repeat words and couldn't say anything else. Someone seemed to be laughing. Who was laughing? Mengqi stared blankly at Yin Qingyan, who was so close to her, and her cheeks suddenly burned. Yin Qingyan let go of her at this moment, and sat up straight again. He supported himself with both hands on the chair. Mengqi. He patted the side of him and motioned for her to sit up. Mengqi hurriedly sat up straight, and obediently put her hands on her knees. Her face was still very hot. Not only was her face very hot, but her ears were also very hot, as if they had been soaked in hot water. It was so hot that her head was a little dazed. After a while, she finally remembered the question Yin Qingyan had asked her before. He seemed to be asking her, "What if he wants to do the same to you? How would he treat her?" Mengqi suddenly remembered. At that time in Luoyan Heights, Yin Qingyan had already gone mad. His 5-spirit primordial qi had almost collapsed, and his mind was abnormal. When she straightened out his primordial qi and woke his consciousness up again, he obviously couldn't control his body anymore. Therefore Mengqi blinked slowly. At that time, Yin Qingyan had done something that ordinary Dao companions would do to her. So that was the case. Mengqi heaved a sigh of relief. When she saw Yin Qingyan's expression earlier, it was very different from before. She wondered if he was still unhappy because she had chosen to leave the Starfall Sea. So it was because of this. Mengqi coughed softly and sat upright. Qingyan's Henjun. She thought for a moment and took the initiative to say, "For medical cultivators, treating others is also a way of cultivation." "I know," Yin Qingyan replied. "This is probably the same as sword cultivators practicing their swords and Dharma cultivators practicing their spells. For medical cultivators, this is a daily routine. Even if it's for the sake of my own cultivation, it's hard for me to do such a thing," Mengqi said again. Yin Qingyan. It's common to have accidents, injuries, or stagnation in cultivation during the process of cultivation. If it's more serious, it's even common to suffer from qi deviation. Cultivators go against the heavens. If you want to step onto a higher realm, there are always some things that you have to experience, Mengqi said softly. She paused and looked into Yin Qingyan's eyes. She said sincerely, "So, perfected cultivator Qingyan, you don't have to take such a trivial matter to heart. Don't we cultivators have to go through tribulations to advance to every major realm after the golden elixir realm?" Mengqi continued. "When the tribulation lightning comes crashing down, you'll die if you're not careful. In comparison, Qingyan's Henjun and I only helped each other cultivate once." She looked at Yin Qingyan's expression and hurriedly added, "My cultivation is far inferior to Qingyan's Henjun's. In fact, I benefited more. My medical skills and personal cultivation have both improved." Yin Qingyan. Did he make a mistake? Was Mengqi actually their demon cultivator? Didn't they say that the cultivators from the 3,000 worlds cared about this kind of thing? Actually, Mengqi suddenly said, "I personally don't particularly agree with this kind of cultivation method." Yin Qingyan felt that she couldn't keep up with this girl's thoughts at all. "Dual cultivation," Mengqi said. "That day was also a coincidence. Qingyan's Henjun is a great divine demon, and I'm an ordinary cultivator from the 3,000 worlds. If it weren't for the fact that you were about to suffer from qi deviation, and I'm a medical cultivator, our spiritual energies are completely different. And our cultivation methods are also completely different. If we force dual cultivation, I'm afraid it would be harmful to both of us. Yin Qingyan. Mengqi only felt that it was natural to discuss this with Yin Qingyan. Not only that, but a smile gradually appeared on her face. This feeling was really similar to the way they used to interact with each other in the past. Yin Qingyan was always very willing to listen to her thoughts and never laughed at her whimsical thoughts. Otherwise, he wouldn't help Mengqi use arrays to inscribe spells on elixirs like magic treasures. When Mengqi had any questions or ideas about cultivation, she had always discussed it directly with Yin Qingyan like this. The two talked, and they were like teachers and friends. For Mengqi, the years they spent together and living in seclusion in the valley were the happiest and most memorable times for her. However, Mengqi continued, if the cultivation methods are similar and the spiritual energies are of the same origin, dual cultivation should be quite helpful. The Heaven and Earth Book House should also have such books. If I have the chance, I can go and find them and take a look. In that case, she paused and suddenly said, if a cultivator's inner core is damaged, can we use dual cultivation to help the injured cultivator cultivate? Why didn't I think of this before? Mengqi's attention had completely turned to this. In fact, since the development of the three realms, there were many cultivators looking for Tao companions. However, most of them looked for a like-minded person to accompany each other on the path of cultivation. Of course, there were also some large sects that would marry for some benefits or even inheritance. There were very few who really did it for dual cultivation. Mengqi rummaged in her storage brocade bag for a while, and took out a few jade slips. She had really never thought that a medical cultivator like her, who used a cauldron as her natal magic treasure, could use medical spells and spiritual energy to refine medicine, and send the medicine to the meridians of the person she wanted to treat. Cultivators like Yan Xian, whose inner core was damaged, could no longer continue cultivating. The inner core was divided into divine sense. Without divine sense, even if their spiritual sea was intact, it would be difficult for them to mobilize large amounts of spiritual energy. Therefore, Yin Xian could barely be considered a qi cultivator now. Similarly, because of the absence of divine sense, the amount of spiritual energy that could be mobilized was limited. When medicinal energy entered the body, they couldn't use medicinal energy to repair the damaged inner core. However, if they could dual cultivation, it might be a way. Mengqi quickly flipped through the jade slips she found. These were the jade slips she bought in the Cloud Immortal Pavilion after she had a lot of spirit stones. There were also some jade slips related to medical cultivation that could be bought in the heavens beyond heaven. With the help of divine sense, cultivators could read very quickly. She didn't want to learn everything on the jade slips now. She just wanted to find some content that she needed, so her speed was even faster. Yin Qingyan. The room became extremely quiet. Mengqi looked at the jade slips for a while, then found a blank jade slip and began to write on it. She was completely immersed in her own world, as if she had completely forgotten where they were now and that there was someone else in the room. After a long while, Yin Qingyan slowly raised her hand and gently clasped it 3 times in the air. In the courtyard where they were, the door opened and Su Junmo, dressed in white, walked in quickly. "My lord." Before he had time to see the situation here, he first bowed respectfully to Su Junmo. "I've received news that the demon realm is trying to use the entrance of the demon realm's fallen star sea to connect the 3,000 worlds and the demon realm." Yin Qingyan nodded slightly and said faintly, "They want to take advantage of the opening of the 10 Extremes Mountain and the reappearance of the Demon Lord token to launch a sneak attack on the 2 worlds." He paused and said, "Is there any news from the demon realm? Are there any movements in the demon realm's 10 Extremes Mountain?" Lord Tuoba said that he had already sent people to keep an eye on the 10 Extremes Mountain a month ago, and there hasn't been any changes until now, Su Junmo said. Yin Qingyan nodded. "Let him keep an eye on it." "Yes," Su Junmo quickly replied. He stood up straight and looked up at Yin Qingyan. If he guessed correctly, there would be a few special treasures appearing in today's heavenly auction. These things. Su Junmo's eyes suddenly widened, and he looked at the green-robed woman sitting next to Yin Qingyan in disbelief. "That? Isn't that Mengqi?" Why is she here? And she's even sitting next to his lord. Not only that, she didn't seem to notice him coming in at all, and he didn't know what she was thinking. It wasn't that Su Junmo didn't guess the relationship between Mengqi and his lord. After all, she had one of the incarnations of the demon lord token in her hands. But sitting side by side with his master in broad daylight like this, even Su Junmo was tongue-tied for a moment, and he didn't know what to say. Su Junmo was stunned for a moment, and he blurted out completely subconsciously, "My lord Mengqi shi." Oh. Before he could finish, he was interrupted by Yin Qingyan. The white-robed young man simply leaned lazily on the reclining chair, and looked at Su Junmo with a faint smile. Mengqi. Yes. Yes. Su Junmo was stunned, and he quickly lowered his head. His mind was racing, and he didn't dare to speak casually again. Yin Qingyan glanced at him again, and reached out to pat Mengqi's shoulder. Mengqi, you can think about it later. The auction is about to start. Huh? Okay. Mengqi quickly put away the jade scroll and asked, "Is there anything special about today's heavenly auction?" She turned her gaze and saw Su Junmo standing in the courtyard. It was the first time Mengqi saw Su Junmo like this. He was very respectful and restrained. She couldn't help but smile and take the initiative to greet him. "Su Junmo, you're here too?" Yes. Su Junmo breathed a sigh of relief. Although Mengqi usually called him that most of the time, but didn't his lord just warn him? He was afraid that Mengqi would call him something strange again. If that happened, he would be in trouble. "Have a seat," Yin Qingyan said to Su Junmo. He flicked his sleeve, and a wooden table landed steadily in front of Mengqi and him. As if by magic, a few more food boxes appeared on top of it. The lids of the boxes were opened, and there were all kinds of candies, some exquisite snacks, and a box of fresh fruits. Su Junmo found the furthest chair and sat down. He didn't dare to look at the two of them directly, and he only felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. But even though he didn't look, he could hear voices in his ears. Mengqi asked him, "Su Junmo, what do you want to eat?" "I don't want anything." Su Junmo refused repeatedly. "Do you want tea?" Mengqi didn't think much of it. The last time she came to the Heaven-class auction house, there were also these snacks and candies. These things in the outland tasted very good, and they were extremely difficult to buy in the 3,000 worlds. Mengqi looked at Su Junmo sitting on a lonely chair far away, and there was nothing in front of him. She simply picked up the teapot, poured a cup of tea, and handed it to Su Junmo. "Thank you, Meng. Fellow Taoist Meng." Su Junmo quickly stood up and took the teacup, thanking her in a low voice. "Mengqi. Fellow Taoist Meng?" How long had it been since Su Junmo and the others called her that? Mengqi didn't return to the reclining chair. She pulled a chair and sat opposite Yin Qingyan. The valley gradually quieted down. She realized that Yin Qingyan's courtyard should be at the highest point of the Heaven-class auction house. The last time she came, Mengqi was almost at the same level as the auctioneer. Now she was overlooking the entire valley. She also poured a cup of tea for Yin Qingyan, and then focused on the center of the valley. Since Qingyan's Henjun specially brought her to this auction, there must be something special. Perhaps there was something she could use? Mengqi thought of this and turned to ask Yin Qingyan. "Qingyan's Henjun, I came to the Heaven-class auction house once before. There's a number plate in the room for us to use for the auction. If I want to buy something today, what should I do?" She had seen the Heaven-class auction house once and knew that many things were priced in Xian spirit stones. Mengqi had a few thousand Xian spirit stones now, and sometimes if she was lucky, she could buy something very cheaply. It was like this last time. The nameless art that she bought for a few hundred 8th grade spirit stones was still lying in her storage brocade pouch. "If you need it, just bid," Yin Qingyan said. "Okay." Mengqi nodded. Since Yin Qingyan said so, then there was no problem. He definitely had a way to let her participate in the auction without getting her identity wrong. Yin Qingyan's words had a completely different meaning in Su Junmo's ears. So his lord meant to make Mengqi smile today and spend a lot of money. He suddenly felt a little sympathy for the people who came to participate in the auction. As long as Mengqi took a fancy to it, it would probably fall into her pocket in the end. After all, in terms of wealth, All the sects present could not compare to the master of sky beyond sky. Soon, a female cultivator who looked about 25 or 26 years old appeared in the center of the valley. She was quite beautiful, and at this time, she gracefully bowed to the surroundings of the valley and said straightforwardly, "This auction is for jade slips." As soon as she said this, the entire valley became noisy. There was no doubt that the heaven-class auction house only had treasures. Sometimes all kinds of jade slips would appear. Some of these jade slips came from the Starfall Sea, some from the blessed enclave of sky beyond sky, and some from the various forbidden areas of the 3,000 worlds. Generally, the jade slips that could enter the heaven-class auction house were definitely treasures, even if people did not know the contents of the jade slips for the time being. Some of them were lost inheritances, and some were left behind by a powerful senior. They recorded his travel experience or cultivation experience, and some even recorded the refining method of life-bound weapons or magic treasures. The value of these jade slips was high, and it could be said that they were even higher than some natural treasures or divine weapons. Natural treasures would always be used up, but jade slips could be passed down from generation to generation, and maybe it could make a sect rise. Therefore, the heaven-class auction house would have jade slips, but generally there were not many of them. Often it would be good if 1 or 2 jade slips appeared in an auction. Sometimes there would not even be a single jade slip. At this time, the female cultivator who hosted the auction said that it was for jade slips, and the major sects were naturally shocked. The people who were invited to participate in the heaven-class auction house's auction were all secretly shocked. Mirror Moon Heaven's 10 Extremes Mountain was about to open, and almost all of these people were the sect masters of the major sections. Almost all of them came from the 10 major sects of the 4 realms. They could send 3 disciples into the 10 Extremes Mountain this time. And this was also the agreement between Mirror Moon Heaven and the major sects that had lasted for thousands of years. Originally, some of the sect masters who were invited were still hesitating whether to come to this auction or not. At this time, those sect masters who hesitated but still came all secretly said luckily in their hearts. Luckily, they still decided to come. Otherwise, they would definitely be very annoyed if they missed such an auction. This time, there are a total of 12 jade slips. However, the female cultivator waited for a while, and when the valley became quiet again, she continued with a smile, "All the jade slips need to be brought into the 10 Extremes Mountain to be opened." The entire valley was in an uproar again. This time, even Meng Qi opened his eyes wide in surprise, and turned to look at Yun Qingyan. They needed to be brought into the 10 Extremes Mountain to be opened? Why was that? Could it be that these jade slips recorded some secrets of the 10 Extremes Mountain? Or could it be that these jade slips could help people pass through the 10 Extremes Mountain and let everyone reach the peak smoothly? Meng Qi's heart moved slightly. Then should she bid for one? She frowned slightly, but it was very clear that the price of the items in this auction would definitely be very high, and the value of these jade slips probably couldn't be measured with Xian spirit stones. Meng Qi looked around the valley. Although she didn't know who was invited, she could imagine that they were definitely the sects that had the qualifications to enter the 10 Extremes Mountain. These sects were all one of the 10 major sects of the 3 realms, 4 realms. She definitely couldn't compare to the accumulated wealth of a sect. These are jade slips left behind from ancient times. Yin Qingyan said. They can only be used by human cultivators in the 10 Extremes Mountain. And among the 12 jade slips, some can only be used by sword cultivators, some can only be used by spell cultivators or medical cultivators. There can be no mistakes. Meng Qi nodded. Then she definitely didn't have any hope. The Wind Alliance was definitely among the invited. They were super rich. They might even be richer than the Broken Space Sect and Jinghua Sky. Meng Qi, come here. Yin Qingyan waved at her. He reclined on the soft reclining chair, lazy and relaxed. Meng Qi walked to his side. Yin Qingyan held her hand and let her sit beside him. Do you want it? He asked gently. Yes. Meng Qi nodded. But I definitely don't have enough spirit stones. Although she sat beside Yin Qingyan, her gaze had already drifted to the valley. Sure enough, after the female cultivator in charge of the auction introduced it, the first jade slip was auctioned. It could be used by sword cultivators. Those participating in the auction were obviously sword cultivator sections. The starting price of the jade slip was 100 Xian spirit stones, but in the blink of an eye, it had already reached 1,000 Xian spirit stones. And obviously, this was only the beginning. Mengqi. In the end, the first jade slip was sold for 1,000 earth spirit stones. Mengqi quickly calculated. Above 9th grade spirit stones were heaven and earth Xian spirit stones. 1,000 9th grade spirit stones could only be exchanged for 1 Xian spirit stone, and 10,000 Xian spirit stones could only be exchanged for 1 earth spirit stone. Heaven spirit stones, on the other hand, required 10,000 earth spirit stones. Mengqi couldn't help but look at her storage brocade pouch. All her Xian spirit stones added together couldn't even be exchanged for 1 earth spirit stone. 1,000 earth spirit stones sigh. Mengqi could only sigh regretfully in her heart. She probably couldn't afford it. Su Junmo didn't have such thoughts at all. He had no right to interfere in the affairs of the realm beyond heaven, but he was very familiar with the situation of the sects in the Trichiliocosm. The 4 realms each had 10 great sects, and there were a total of 7 medical sections. Today, all of them must have been invited. He just didn't know how many jade slips were given to medical cultivators. The sword cultivator sect had a total of 5 jade slips. Among them, the 5th was sold for 1,500 earth spirit stones, while the first 4 were sold for about 1,000 earth spirit stones. There were also 5 jade slips for dharma cultivators. Similarly, the cheapest one was sold for 1,000 earth spirit stones. When the auction for the 5th dharma cultivator jade slip ended, the sects here could already calculate that there were 2 jade slips for medical cultivators. In other words, the 7 medical cultivator sects had to fight for 2 jade slips. TSK, Su Junmo added in his heart, it's 8 sections. Although Mengqi was alone, she had the Lord's support. That was definitely a family. And the strongest one. The valley was silent for a moment. The female cultivator hosting the auction said with a smile, "Then the last 2 jade slips are for medical cultivators. Now the starting price for the first jade slip is still 100 Xian spirit stones." Mengqi sighed again. Medical cultivator sects, especially large ones like the Wind Alliance, were very rich. Previously, when she asked the Xue family for 3,000 Xian spirit stones because of Xue Lingfeng, they gave it to her without even blinking. If he were to bid for this jade slip now, he would easily be able to earn 3,000 earth spirit stones. She sat there in a daze and decided not to participate in the auction. Sure enough, although there were only 7 medical cultivator sects, the price had already reached 100 earth spirit stones in the blink of an eye. The price rose even faster than the sword cultivator sections. Mengqi. Forget it. At least she knows about this, doesn't she? It was better than entering the 10 Extremes mountain without knowing anything. At this moment, Yin Qingyan held her hand and raised it. A black wooden tablet fell into her palm. Bit. He also saw the slight disappointment on Mengqi's face. He chuckled and said, "At 100 earth spirit stones." "But I don't have that many earth spirit stones," Mengqi quickly said. "Qingyan's Henjun, this item is useless to you. It's fine if I can't afford it." "Do you want it?" Yin Qingyan ignored her previous question and asked. "If I want it, I definitely want it," Mengqi said. "But there's nothing I can do if I can't afford it." Yin Qingyan held her hand, and a strand of spiritual consciousness separated from the wooden tablet. The female cultivator hosting the auction immediately said, "A fellow Taoist has bid 500 earth spirit stones." Mengqi. Su Junmo looked away, not daring to look at anything. The black wooden tablet belonged to his lord, and the one who bid was also his lord. There was no need for him to call Mengqi to his side and hold her hand. Su Junmo slowly exhaled. See no evil, hear no evil, see no evil. In any case, Mengqi would not lose out. The price of the jade slips in the previous auctions did indeed rise very quickly when it came to black spirit stones, but when it came to earth spirit stones, everyone was more relaxed. After all, 100 earth spirit stones was not a small amount for these large sections. Now, Yin Qingyan directly raised the price to 500 earth spirit stones as soon as she bid. The valley fell into a rare moment of silence. The bidder directly bid with spiritual consciousness, and did not shout it out. Everyone guessed that it was most likely someone from the Wind Alliance who was so rich. After a while, the price of the jade slips continued to rise. 2,000 Earth Spirit Stones. Yin Qingyan held Mengqi's hand again and raised it. The female cultivator hosting the auction immediately announced again. 2,500 Earth Spirit Stones. A voice came from the other side of the valley. Mengqi was more familiar with medical cultivation sects, so she immediately recognized Xuechuan's voice. The Wind Alliance was indeed rich. She thought silently in her heart. 3,000. At this time there were no other sects participating. Yin Qingyan still held Mengqi's hand and raised it slightly. The female cultivator immediately announced again. Qingyan's Henjun. Mengqi turned her head and looked at Yin Qingyan. Let's forget about it. It's okay. Yin Qingyan's eyelids drooped slightly, and her eyes flashed. But Mengqi frowned. This jade slip is useless to you, and I'm only a nascent soul cultivator. This jade slip may be of limited help. If it's 1,000 or 2,000 Earth Spirit Stones, I can buy it myself. Now it's already 3,000 Earth Spirit Stones. It's really Lingdiankenshu. Come, it's okay. Yin Qingyan's tone was indifferent. The jade slip is also useful to me. Su Junmo. Why did he come to Sky Beyond Heaven now? Couldn't he wait until the auction was over? Really? Mengqi frowned slightly and stared at Yin Qingyan. Yes. Yin Qingyan chuckled softly and comforted her. It's really useful. Mengqi had never doubted Yin Qingyan, but now she couldn't help but be skeptical. This time, the Wind Alliance was silent for a long time. After a while, Xuechuan's voice sounded again. 4,000 Earth Spirit Stones. This time, even the Sword Cultivator and Dharma Cultivator sects were a little shocked. They didn't expect the most intense competition in this auction to be between some sections. One had to know that the development of medical cultivator sects in the past thousands of years was far behind that of Dharma Cultivator and Sword Cultivator sections. 5,000 Earth Spirit Stones. Almost without pause, the female cultivator announced again. A fellow Taoist has bid 5,000 Earth Spirit Stones. This time, the Wind Alliance was silent for a long time. Xuechuan sat quietly in their courtyard. Beside him, the other three family heads of the Wind Alliance were also present. His eldest son, Xue Qingxian, was standing behind him. At this time he whispered to his father. Father, this person bid so quickly. He must be very confident. I've noticed that there are a total of 7 medical cultivator sects participating in this auction, including us. This bidder doesn't seem to belong to one of the 7 sections. Ever since the catastrophe 2,000 years ago, the Medical Cultivator Assembly Alliance was established. The communication between medical cultivator sects was more frequent than between Sword Cultivator and Dharma Cultivator sections. Xue Qingxian was no stranger to the 7 medical cultivator sects invited this time. He was even very familiar with a few of them. Listening carefully, he soon discovered that the person who bid the most boldly was not from one of the 7 medical cultivator sections. The 7 sects had been bidding the whole time, and this person had only used his spiritual consciousness to entrust the female cultivator, hosting the auction, to bid the whole time. Therefore, it was either that this person deliberately did this to hide their identity and secretly bid for the jade slip. After all, a man's wealth was his own ruin. There were only 7 medical cultivator sections. Everyone could easily guess which 2 sects would bid for the jade slip in the end. However, Xue Qingxian estimated that this possibility was relatively small, because this price was already a price that even the Wind Alliance felt pained about. The other medical cultivator sects couldn't compare to them. Then there was only the second possibility. The bidder was not from one of the 7 sections. Xue Qingxian pondered for a moment and said, "Why don't we compete for the next jade slip?" Xuechuan hesitated for a moment, and then slowly nodded. He had always relied on his son and trusted him very much. Over the years, Xue Qingxian had been handling a lot of things in the Xue family. The valley was silent for a moment again. The female cultivator hosting the auction smiled sweetly and said, "If no one continues to bid, then the first medical cultivator jade slip will be sold for 5,000 Earth Spirit Stones. Congratulations, fellow Taoist, for winning this jade slip." She paused and continued. Next, we'll auction the second medical cultivator jade slip. Mengqi didn't really want to listen to what she said next. Yin Qingyan held her hand, and a wisp of his spiritual consciousness mark fell on the black wooden slip in her hand. Mengqi knew that this meant that the auction was successful. If the buyer didn't want to expose their identity, they could directly use this spiritual consciousness mark to go to the relay station in Sky Beyond Heaven to pick up the item they bid for. It was safe and convenient. This was 5,000 Earth Spirit Stones. Mengqi couldn't help but tremble in her heart. Almost a year ago, she was still a little medical cultivator, who couldn't even take out 28th grade Spirit Stones. Later on, it was much better. Previously, when she went to Heavenly Sea Pavilion to buy Dharma treasures, she felt that she seemed to be quite rich. She didn't expect to experience such an auction with Earth Spirit Stones as the unit so quickly. Mengqi was in a daze and didn't notice that Yin Qingyan was still holding her hand. The 10 Extremes Mountain is about to open. This time, Sky Beyond Heaven will allow the buyer to directly take away these jade slips. Yin Qingyan lowered her eyelids slightly and said slowly, "Oh." Mengqi nodded. But Mengqi. Yin Qingyan looked up at her. He was already very handsome, and his facial features were so perfect that there seemed to be no flaws. At this moment, he was wearing a white robe and leaning lazily on the soft couch. Mengqi was already a little shocked by what happened just now. At this time, when she met Yin Qingyan's gaze, she was even more dazzled. For a moment, she couldn't look away at all. But it can only be taken away by the person who bid for it, or their close relatives. Yin Qingyan's voice was slightly hoarse, or their Dao companion. Chapter 146. Mengqi lowered her head and looked at the black wooden token in her hand. Yin Qingyan's hand was still in hers. His fingers were longer than Mengqi's, and they wrapped around her hand. It was quite appropriate, as if the two of them were just right to hold hands like this. Su Junmo had been looking down the whole time. Now he didn't even dare to look over from the corner of his eyes. Mengqi. Yin Qingyan's voice was gentle. The 10 Extremes Mountain is about to open. I can't send the jade slips to the Trichiliocosm now. Oh. Mengqi stretched her fingers and looked at Yin Qingyan in surprise. Qingyan's Henjun, don't you have a use for this jade slip? You don't have to give it to me. Even if I can enter the 10 Extremes Mountain, this kind of thing is of limited help to me. You don't have to consider me at all. Yin Qingyan. Su Junmo. Mengqi understood that these jade slips were definitely very precious. They were measured in Earth Spirit Stones. If she could afford it, she naturally wanted to buy it. However, she was also very self-aware. She reckoned that these jade slips would have other uses in the 10 Extremes Mountain this time. Mengqi indeed wanted to pass the test, but with her current cultivation, these foreign objects were probably of limited help to her. It would definitely be more useful in Yin Qingyan's hands than in her own hands. Okay. Yin Qingyan took a deep breath and sighed softly. He sat up straight and looked into Mengqi's eyes. Mengqi, I can't use this jade slip even if I bring it into the 10 Extremes Mountain. I'm not a medical cultivator, he reminded Mengqi. Mengqi looked at Yin Qingyan, and Yin Qingyan also looked at her. She had never doubted Yin Qingyan. She believed every word he said without a doubt. Mengqi immediately understood. Qingyan's Henjun, you want me to bring it into the 10 Extremes Mountain, and then think of a way to give it to you? Okay. Yin Qingyan nodded. Okay. Mengqi no longer had any doubts. Are these jade slips useful? These 12 jade slips were passed down from ancient times, Yin Qingyan said. As for what is recorded in them, no one knows. He propped up his right leg and placed his arm on his knee. Mengqi, do you know where the outland came from? Why was it born? I don't know. Mengqi shook his head and guessed. Is it also from ancient times? That's right. Yin Qingyan nodded. His voice was pleasant, and when he spoke to Mengqi, it was very gentle. When it entered the ears, it was like a mountain spring, as if it could calm one's impetuous heart. The master of the outland is every clan leader of the White Tiger clan of the Sky Demon. Su Junmo suddenly stood up. I still have urgent matters to attend to, so I will take my leave first. He did not dare to look at Meng Qi and Yun Qingyan's expressions. After hurriedly taking his leave, he turned around and left. What Yun Qingyan was saying now involved the secrets of the White Tiger clan of the Sky Demon. He really did not dare to listen more. Meng Qi could listen to these secrets, but he could not. Meng Qi watched Su Junmo's figure disappear in a hurry, then turned his head and continued to look at Yun Qingyan. It was obviously very important for him to tell her these things at this time. She listened attentively and asked, "But most of the cultivators here are from the 3,000 worlds. If it was the outland passed down from the ancient times by the White Tiger clan of the Sky Demon, then why was it in the 3,000 worlds and not in the demon world? The demon world also has the outland." Yun Qingyan said, "Their master is the sect master of Jinghua Heaven." Meng Qi. She frowned slightly, feeling that this matter was definitely not simple. Thinking about it, since ancient times, the Almighty People had set up the heavens beyond heaven until now. It had become indispensable for the cultivators of the 3,000 worlds. Moreover, the Sky Demon Royal clan was the master of the outland of the 3,000 worlds, and the sect master of the number 1 Dharma cultivation sect in the 3,000 worlds was the master of the outland of the demon world. Why was this? Meng Qi sat there in a daze, his eyes full of confusion. Yun Qingyan reached out and stroked her hair. "There are reasons for this arrangement. I will slowly tell you these reasons when we come out of the 10 Extremes mountain." "Okay." Meng Qi nodded. There was a faint voice in the depths of her heart, saying that she actually didn't need to know these things. However, since Yun Qingyan said it, she would listen obediently. She would never not listen to what he wanted to tell her. These 12 jade slips were found in the outland. This time, they appeared before the 10 Extremes mountain opened, so they could only be brought into the 10 Extremes mountain. Yun Qingyan continued, "So it must be related to the 10 Extremes mountain." "I see." Meng Qi nodded. Ji Wujiong told me before that in the ancient times, all the major sects were blooming. Although they were still mainly sword cultivators and spell cultivators, medical cultivators and formation cultivators also had a place and could compete with each other. Then why are these jade slips only for sword cultivators, spell cultivators and medical cultivators? She asked in confusion. "These should be jade slips from the end of the ancient war of catastrophe," Yun Qingyan said. "At that time, there were countless casualties in the 3 realms. It's possible that some cultivators could no longer leave behind such jade slips." Meng Qi was stunned. These words were really too heavy. Yun Qingyan's meaning was clearly that these ancient powerhouses who could not leave behind jade slips had already. Recently, the Starfall Sea has been moving more and more frequently, and the number of cracks in the barrier is increasing day by day. I'm afraid that something huge will happen in the 3 realms. Moreover, since the ancient times, among the billions of cultivators in the 3 realms, no Mahayana cultivator has been able to ascend. Yun Qingyan looked at Meng Qi. So in that war of catastrophe, some secrets must have been buried. Meng Qi's heart stirred, and she wanted to speak. That day in the Starfall Sea, Senior Lin Yan had told her some things, but she had also instructed that those things could not be told to anyone else. Meng Qi did not intend to keep any secrets from Yun Qingyan, but since Senior Lin Yan had instructed her, she could not say anything. Moreover, those things might not necessarily be related to today's matter. These 12 jade slips are obviously not as simple as inheritance, Yun Qingyan said. I understand. Meng Qi nodded. I will take the jade slips into the 10 Extremes mountain, and then tell the secrets inside to Qingyan's Henjun. Ranwen. Lashi paused and said, however, the 10 Extremes mountain is about to open. I'm afraid we really can't pass on this jade slip. Qingyan's Henjun. Meng Qi looked at Yun Qingyan. I can only wrong you, and become Dao companions with me. She also knew that this was for the secret of the jade slips, for the 10 Extremes mountain, or even for all the cultivators in the 3 realms or the 3 realms. It was just becoming Dao companions, and it did not matter. However, when these words came out of her mouth, Meng Qi's face still flushed red. Not only her face, but even her ears began to burn. Meng Qi did not care. She was just an itinerant cultivator in the 3 realms who did not belong to any sect. It did not matter if she had one more or one less. However, Yin Qingyan was different. He was perfected Lord White Tiger, and he held the Demon Lord token. He was also the patriarch of the White Tiger clan. He was the king of the heavenly demon kings, and he was already a whole enlightened expert. Such a person was definitely the object of admiration of countless female cultivators in the demon realm, and they wanted to become Dao companions with him. After all, people like Xue Chengxian, Su Junmo, and Chu Tianfeng were all very popular. As soon as Meng Qi said that, she felt that what she said was really, before she could figure out what she was really thinking, she heard Yin Qingyan say, "Okay." Qing Yan's Henjun. Meng Qi's face became even redder. This is just a temporary measure. After this matter, we can naturally break the Dao companion contract, and then... Oh, Yin Qingyan did not wait for her to finish. He raised his eyebrows and asked lazily, "Meng Qi, do you have any cultivators who want to become Dao companions with you?" No, Meng Qi stammered. "In that case, this matter has no effect." Yin Qingyan narrowed his eyes, and no one could tell what he was thinking. "We'll talk about the rest after we come out of the 10 Extremes mountain." "Yes." Meng Qi nodded quickly. Then, Yin Qingyan reached out and shook her hand. "Your spiritual sense." Meng Qi felt that she had completely become a puppet now. She moved whenever Yin Qingyan said something. She separated a wisp of her spiritual sense. In the heavens beyond heaven, spiritual sense was like divine sense, and it could leave a mark to confirm one's identity. Yin Qingyan also separated a wisp of his spiritual sense. Su Junmo had already left, and there were only the two of them left in this room. The two wisps of spiritual sense met in the air. Yin Qingyan and Meng Qi raised their hands at the same time, and the two wisps of spiritual sense slowly entangled together. Meng Qi looked at the scene in front of her in a trance. The development of the matter was a little beyond her expectations, but it also seemed to be a matter of course. She watched her and Yin Qingyan's spiritual sense entangled in the air, and finally slowly merged into one. Then, the two wisps of spiritual sense that had merged into one were divided into two again. Meng Qi's body shook, and one wisp of spiritual sense entered her forehead. Half of Yin Qingyan's spiritual sense entered her body and returned to her spiritual sea. Meng Qi looked at this scene a little curiously. This was the first time she had become Dao companions with someone, and she had never experienced such a thing. That wisp of spiritual sense quickly merged into her own spirit stone, but something seemed to be different. Meng Qi looked up at Yin Qingyan. "You haven't become Dao companions with anyone else?" Yin Qingyan was speechless. "You haven't seen them either?" His voice was lower than before, and his slightly hoarse voice sounded like the strings of the best guqin being plucked by her ear. Meng Qi only felt her ears getting hotter. She touched her ears subconsciously, shook her head quickly, and said honestly, "It's my first time." "Your natal magic weapon." Yin Qingyan was obviously in a good mood. "Summon the 5-spirit cauldron." "Okay." Meng Qi took out her 5-spirit cauldron. The palm-sized cauldron slowly floated around her. She was now a nascent soul cultivator, and it hadn't been long since she refined the 5-spirit cauldron. Although it was her natal magic weapon and was naturally connected to her mind, it still lacked a bit of spirituality. But now, Meng Qi felt that she could feel a trace of joy in the 5-spirit cauldron. She was a little surprised. So there were such benefits to becoming Dao companions? They had just become Dao companions, but the natal magic weapon actually seemed to have more spirituality. Yin Qingyan raised her hand and flicked it, and the 5-spirit cauldron immediately swayed and pounced on her. Meng Qi really didn't want to use the word pounce, but the chubby 5-spirit cauldron was indeed pouncing on Yin Qingyan. Its round body was also swaying up and down, and it looked like a child who wanted to be hugged by its parents. Meng Qi. Soon the 5-spirit cauldron flew to Yin Qingyan's side. The white-robed man raised his hand, and the small cauldron immediately came to his hand and rubbed against him happily. It was just like a spoiled child. Was this even possible? Meng Qi was stunned. After a natal magic weapon or weapon gained sentience, it would indeed have a lot of spirituality. The more powerful the natal magic weapon, the higher the cultivation level of its owner, and the higher its spirituality. But the target of the 5 spirit cauldron's affection was obviously Yun Qingyan. You can try it too, Yun Qingyan said as she flicked her finger. A white ball of light flew out and floated in the air. Mengqi suddenly thought of something, and his heart skipped a beat. Sure enough, the white ball of light swayed in the air, stretched out its limbs, and even shook its little body. It was actually a cute little white tiger, almost exactly the same as Yun Qingyan when she was injured. Semi-round ears, azure blue eyes, soft and clean white fur. It was so cute that it could almost make anyone's heart soften. That little white tiger also swayed in the air. Ever since Meng Qi found out that Yun Qingyan was little Qi and then lost it, he had actually secretly missed him many times. After all, they used to travel together, eat together, and live together. He could rub her whenever he wanted. The white tiger, little Qi, also especially liked to sleep next to her. It was so obedient and cute. Want to rub? Meng Qi didn't even have time to look at her 5-spirit cauldron. Her eyes were full of that little white tiger now. Xing's primordial spirit was already very cute, but compared to it, Meng Qi still preferred the snow-white and cute little Qi. Can I rub it? Her left hand, which was hanging by her side, curled slightly and then spread out. The little white tiger obviously also felt Meng Qi's presence and turned slightly to look at her. Then, it tilted its little head and pounced towards her. Meng Qi hurriedly reached out to catch it. Although it was only a primordial spirit, it was similar to the real little Qi when she rubbed it. Its white fur was soft all over its body, and its little ears were still fluffy. It was so cute no matter how she looked at it. She simply hugged the little white tiger and let it lie in her arms. She reached out to gently scratch its little chin. The little white tiger looked up and let out a whimper. Its eyes narrowed slightly, and it looked like it was enjoying it very much. It's so cute. Meng Qi turned to Yun Qingyan and said, "It's a pity that we cultivators can't have such a primordial spirit. It's so good to be a demon." Yun Qingyan. With the little white tiger, Meng Qi obviously threw everything else to the back of her mind. The little white tiger lay in her arms obediently, and it was even more obedient than the real little Qi. The auction had already ended, and the entire auction hall was silent. Meng Qi. Yun Qingyan's eyes flashed as she looked at Meng Qi and the little white tiger, who were having so much fun. His true form was a huge and mighty sky demon white tiger. It was majestic and was also famous in the demon world for its good looks. However, Meng Qi didn't seem to like it very much. At least, when he revealed his true form previously, Meng Qi didn't show such an expression to him. Yun Qingyan slowly flicked her fingers, and the little white tiger disappeared from Meng Qi's arms. Her face was full of reluctance and disappointment, but she quickly restrained these expressions and turned to look at Yun Qingyan seriously. "Qingyan's Henjun, is the 10 Extremes mountain about to open?" Meng Qi asked. "Yes." Yun Qingyan nodded. Meng Qi also withdrew his natal Dharma treasure. Yun Qingyan handed the black wooden token to Meng Qi. "Take this and walk out of the heaven-class auction hall. You'll be able to get the jade slip." "Yes." Meng Qi answered and took the black wooden token. She turned it over and over in her hands for a moment, before looking up at Yun Qingyan. Meng Qi stood up and bowed to Yun Qingyan. "Qingyan's Henjun, I'll leave first." "Go." "Qingyan's Henjun." Meng Qi looked at Yun Qingyan. "Please." She pressed her lips together. In front of her was a Xiuzha who was far stronger than her. He was the white tiger true monarch who had been able to become the victor in the last fight for the Yao Lord token, and had ruled the Yao realm for 100 years. "Please take care." Meng Qi bowed to him, and turned to stride out the door. She was not a sentimental person, but her eyes were slightly hot right now. She didn't know why, but even though she knew that Yun Qingyan did not need her to worry, she still couldn't help but worry about him. Meng Qi walked quickly. At this time, there were no Xiuzha left in the heaven-class auction hall. She held the black wooden token in her hand as she stepped out of the courtyard. Her storage brocade pouch seemed to vibrate. She hurriedly looked and saw the small jade slip. The black wooden token in her hand had disappeared. Meng Qi turned back to look. It was still that small courtyard that looked very ordinary from the outside. It was hard to believe that such an auction had just taken place here. She remembered what Yun Qingyan said. Now there was one more goal to enter the Shiju mountain. In addition to finding a way to pass the test and become stronger as soon as possible, there was also this jade slip. Meng-Chi exhaled and strode towards the teleportation array. She quickly went to the sky beyond heaven and reappeared in the courtyard of Jingyue Heaven. So there was also a sky beyond heaven in the Yao realm? Meng-Chi looked at the sky beyond heaven jade slip in her hand that was already warm from her grip, and thought of Yin Qingyin's words. And the master of that place was the sect master of Jingyue Heaven. In other words, Yin Shunbei was the master of the sky beyond heaven in the Yao realm. Meng-Chi lowered her head. This matter was obviously not that simple, but since Yin Qingyin had already said that he would tell her after leaving the Shiju mountain, she shook her head and threw all these things to the back of her mind. Meng-Chi. There were 3 knocks on the door, and Si Kongxing's voice sounded. Are you done? Meng-Chi quickly responded and got up to open the door for Si Kongxing. That's great. Si Kongxing looked at her and cheered. The disciples of Jingyue Heaven came to inform us that we must go to the foot of the Shiju mountain within an incense stick's time. I was worried that you hadn't finished dealing with your matters. I'm done, Meng-Chi said. Then let's go, Si Kongxing said and affectionately held Meng-Chi's arm. When Meng-Chi and Si Kongxing rushed to the foot of the Shiju mountain, there were already a lot of people gathered there. They were wearing cultivator robes of various colors with their respective sex logos. There were also Lu Xiuzhe like Meng-Chi and Si Kongxing who didn't belong to any sex, but there were very few of them. Their companions had already arrived here first, such as Chu Tianfeng, Li Che and the others. They all belonged to sections. They were able to enter the Shiju mountain this time because they got a spot from their sections. Meng-Chi looked around. Seeing that there were too many Xiuzhe, she wasn't in a hurry to find them. Meng-Chi, Si Kongxing said in a small voice. Qin Xiuma told me to tell you that he also went to the cloud-treading summit first. Everything can wait until we enter the Shiju mountain. Meng-Chi nodded. Qin Xiuma didn't get along with his sect, but now he took the initiative to return to his sect, but he also knew something. Ever since Qin Xiuma said those words to her in the Starfall Sea, Meng-Chi knew that Qin Xiuma was hiding some secrets. He seemed to be the same as her, remembering what happened in her previous life. However, after that, the two of them didn't have a chance to talk at all. Meng-Chi didn't have the chance to experience the Shiju Mountains test in her previous life. Did Qin Xiuma know something? She thought silently in her heart that she still had to find a chance to have a good chat with Qin Xiuma. Oh right, Si Kongxing said. Where did Su Junmo go? He said he had something to do, but he would definitely return before the Shiju mountain opens. Why haven't I seen him yet? As she spoke, she tiptoed and looked around. Su Junmo also went to the sky beyond heaven. Meng-Chi knew about this. Then he left first. Meng-Chi thought about what happened in the sky beyond heaven just now, and still felt a little absent-minded. She couldn't help but reach out and press on her storage brocade pouch, making sure that the jade slip was indeed taken out of the sky beyond heaven. Then she felt relieved. Where's Su Junmo? Si Kongxing was still looking for Su Junmo. Meng-Chi. Xue Qingshuan's voice suddenly came from not far away, full of surprise. Meng-Chi looked up and saw him walking through the crowd towards her. You really came. A moment later, Xue Qingxian stood in front of Meng-Chi. I knew you would definitely come here. As he spoke, he looked up and down at Meng-Chi. You're already in the nascent soul realm? Yes. Meng-Chi nodded. Why is it just the two of you? Xue Qingxian looked at Si Kongxing. Where are the others? They all went to their respective sections. Si Kongxing said. Sister Xue said she didn't have the qualifications to enter the Shiju mountain, so she didn't come here and left first. Yes. Xue Qingxian nodded. He looked at Meng-Chi again and said in a deep voice, I'm afraid the Shiju mountain this time is no small matter. Meng-Chi, you and Si Kongxing will stand on our side in a while. After we enter the mountain, we'll move together. He paused and then continued. You know the people from the Wind Alliance going to the Shiju mountain this time. One is Wen He, and the other is my sister, Xue Lingfeng. He smiled and said, Speaking of which, you're Lingfeng's savior. She'll definitely be happy to see you. Meng-Chi smiled slightly. This eldest son of the Xue family always gave people a very comfortable feeling, and almost never made people sad. He clearly knew that she took 3,000 Xian spirit stones from his family to save Shuelingfeng, but now he didn't mention it at all. As for Shuelingfeng, she remembered that this sister was very talented in medicine, and was bright and lively. Xue Jinwen said that this sister of hers was the most favored daughter of the Xue family. Big brother. Coincidentally, Shuelingfeng also walked towards them at this time. Father wants you to go back. Okay. Xue Qingxian smiled at Meng Qi. See you later. He waved his hand and left with Shuelingfeng. This Miss Xue family doesn't like us, Si Kongxing said. She even glared at us just now. Okay. Meng Qi nodded. But it's okay, Si Kongxing said again. She looked in front. The leader of Mirror Moon Sky, Yin Shunbei, had already appeared. The Shiju mountain was about to open. Where did Su Zhenmo run off to? Si Kongxing stomped her foot. If he doesn't come, we won't be able to wait any longer. Did he say what he had to do? Meng Qi asked. Yes. Si Kongxing nodded. He said that he had something to take care of and wanted to ask for a demon monarch's decree for us. This way, even the cultivators from the 3,000 domains won't kill us unless they have no other choice. After all, the 3,000 domains and the demon realm are on good terms now. Chapter 147. The Demon Lord's Order. Meng Qi nodded thoughtfully. No wonder Su Zhenmo went to Sky Beyond to find Yin Qingyan. So it was for this. But why isn't he back yet? Si Kongxing looked around anxiously. There were already many people in the open space in front of the 10 Extremes mountain. In just 5 minutes, there were still people coming. Meng Qi looked around. There were more and more people, but it was getting quieter. Not long after, Yin Shunbei also appeared in front of the 10 Extremes mountain. As soon as he appeared, everyone became quiet. Meng Qi looked up at Yin Shunbei from afar. He was wearing a simple black robe. As the sect master of the number 1 Dharma cultivation sect in the 3,000 worlds, he did not look overbearing at all. In addition, Meng Qi thought of what Yin Qingyan said. He was also in charge of the sky beyond in the demon realm. He wondered if the sky beyond there was similar to the 3,000 worlds. It's the sect master of Mirror Moon Heaven, Si Kongxing whispered to Meng Qi. Yes. Meng Qi nodded. Is the person you mentioned last time his son? Si Kongxing lowered her voice and did not mention Yin Xian's injury at all. Yes. He looks very powerful. Si Kongxing looked up at Yin Shunbei. What a pity. By the way, Meng Qi. She was still holding Meng Qi's arm and said, Su Zhenmo told me just now that we are itinerant cultivators without sections. It's equivalent to Mirror Moon Heaven specially giving us a spot. So when we enter the 10 Extremes mountain later, we have to go with the disciples of Mirror Moon Heaven. Yes. This was good too. Meng Qi thought of Yin Xian. It just so happened that they could be together. As the two of them were talking, a man in a black robe walked over to them. That person's entire body was covered by a cloak. The hood of the cloak was pulled up and covered his entire head. Meng Qi could only see his lower jaw. Si Kongxing looked warily at the man who had suddenly appeared beside them. Meng Qi. The other party did not remove his cloak and continued to hide Lian in the shadows. He called out to the Meng Qi in a low voice, Let's go together later. Who are you? Si Kongxing asked. Meng Qi had already recognized Yin Xian's voice and hurriedly said to Si Kongxing, That person you just mentioned. Si Kongxing was stunned. Meng Qi raised his hand and pointed at Yin Shunbei who was standing on the high platform in front of Shiju mountain. The sect master of Jinghua Heaven was talking to the sect masters of the other sects in a low voice. The disciples were scattered around and were a little far away. Meng Qi and the others couldn't hear what he was saying. Si Kongxing. Si Kongxing. She hurriedly turned around to look at Yin Xian, who was standing behind her, his entire body wrapped in a cloak. Her bright eyes were filled with surprise. Yin Xian's jaw tightened and he took a step back. Ever since he was injured, he didn't like to stay in the sect. Whether it was those sympathetic or disdainful gazes, they all made him very uncomfortable. This was the bottom of Shiju mountain, and the people here were the most outstanding disciples of the top 10 sections. Yan Xian had the reputation of being a genius in the past, and had friendly relations with many of these people. He didn't want to meet these people. Other than being embarrassed, they wouldn't bring him any benefits. At this moment, Yan Xian met Xing's eyes. His eyes covered by the cloak flashed with a trace of coldness. He didn't know Xing. His cultivation was only equivalent to a Qi disciple, so he couldn't see Xing's identity and cultivation level. "This is my friend Xing," Meng Qi said to Yan Xian. She pulled Xing's arm again, indicating for him not to stare at Yan Xian like this. Then she said, "This is Dao friend Yan Xian." Her voice was very low. They were originally at the back of the crowd. Plus, the disciples of the other sects were all gathered together, so no one came to stand with them. Meng Qi said the words, Yan Xian, very softly and lightly. Only Xing could hear it clearly. Oh. Xing nodded. "I know." She didn't mention Yan Xian's name, but her eyes still stared at Yan Xian without blinking. Xing. Meng Qi pulled Xing's sleeve again. Her good friend was passionate by nature. She knew that she didn't have any ill intentions. Yan Xian didn't even stay in his own sect and ran to Mirror Moon Heaven to mingle in the marketplace. It was definitely because he didn't want to be noticed like this. "I just want to see," Xing said in a low voice. Last time they said that they could continue to fight even if their inner cores were damaged. They didn't let go of the crack in the barrier they were guarding. "They're really amazing." Her eyes were bright, and her face was full of admiration. "I fought with someone before. That person was very strong. With a wave of his sleeve, he beat me until I rolled on the ground. My inner core was shaken. Heavens." Xing's voice was still very low, but her tone was very exaggerated. "I immediately felt dizzy. Don't talk about fighting. I just wanted to lie on the ground and cry. I couldn't even sit up. So," she said in a small voice. Her eyes were still bright as she looked at Yan Xian. "You're really amazing." Meng Qi smiled sweetly. Even the coldness in Yan Xian's eyes faded a lot. No one would hate such a compliment, especially from a beautiful and sincere girl. Yan Xian was silent for a moment. Then he said indifferently, "It's not that amazing. I still ended up like this. When I became Master's disciple, he once asked me." Xing shook her head and continued, "Why did I become his disciple? Why did I cultivate?" "What did you say?" Meng Qi was also curious. "I told Master that it was to become stronger," Xing said. "Everyone wants to become stronger. Everyone also wants to become stronger." Yan Xian seemed to chuckle. Then he said casually, "But with the heavenly Tao above, cultivators go against the heavens. There are tribulations and many setbacks. Coupled with the influence of one's talent, there are only a few who can truly become stronger and reach the peak. Who knows how many people have died along the way, but no one knows." Meng Qi's heart moved slightly. Actually, Yan Xian's words were quite in line with her experience. Moreover, she was even more miserable back then. She died before she could become stronger. "It's not like that." Xing shook her head again. "I haven't finished yet." She paused and put one hand behind her back. Then she continued, "My master asked me again, why did I become stronger? I said, I want to protect the people I want to protect." She smiled at Yan Xian. Even though she couldn't see the other's expression, she said seriously, "That's why I want to become stronger. I think fellow must be the same. You want to protect them. That's why you were able to persist after your Naiden was destroyed." She didn't say who the Yan Xian was protecting. Maybe his persistence didn't protect anyone. Or perhaps, his persistence had protected many people in Western Kingdom. Meng Qi looked at Xing, and then turned to look at Yan Xian. Under the cloak, the youth stood tall and dazed. He didn't speak for a long time. "So fellow, you are persisting on your path. In the future, you will get better and become stronger." Xing continued. "You don't have to," she pointed at Yan Xian's cloak. "You don't have to cover yourself like this. Those people who make you unhappy are only because they can't understand your path. You don't have to pay attention to them. My master said that the Xiuzuan who become especially powerful in the end are the Xiuzuan who can persist in their own path from the beginning. You are already one of the most powerful of those people. Thank you, Yin Xian said softly after a long while. Meng Qi smiled at him. Holding hands with Si Kongxing, she turned around and continued to look at Yin Shenbei. Behind them, the black-robed youth still didn't take off the hood of his cloak. It was just that the enmity he had towards Si Kongxing had ultimately dissipated by quite a bit. The low and deep sound of the bell rang after the time it took for an incense stick to burn. The sound was distant and could almost spread through all of Mirror Moon Heaven. The area in front of 10 Extreme Mountain became quiet. The sect leaders of the 10 major sects of the Four Jia had all returned to their sections. Yin Shenbei took a step forward and said, "This old man is the sect leader of Mirror Moon Heaven, and has guarded 10 Extreme Mountain for the Four Jia for almost 10,000 years. Now it is time for 10 Extreme Mountain to open once every 10 years. He paused and then slowly said, "This year, it is not just 10 Extreme Mountain that opens once every 10 years, but also once every 100 years, once every 1,000 years," and he looked around. While his voice was not loud, it clearly reached the ears of everyone present. Once every 10,000 years. None of the Xiuzhi spoke. Meng Qi and Si Kongxing also listened silently. According to past experience, every time 10 Extreme Mountain opens once every 100 years, once every 1,000 years, it will be more dangerous than usual. This is the first time it opens once every 10,000 years. The danger is self-evident. Friends, you can choose whether to enter 10 Extreme Mountain or not. Yin Shenbei explained the whole matter clearly with a few simple words. After speaking, he retreated to the side as though he was not willing to speak more. The area in front of 10 Extreme Mountain became noisy again. It could be assumed that it was the first time many of the sects had heard of this. The enormous plaza in front of 10 Extreme Mountain was noisy. The 10 major sects of the Four Jia would always change every 100 years. Some sects might decline. Some new sects would continuously produce a few genius disciples and would rise strongly. Sects like Heavenly Sea Pavilion became stronger day by day after obtaining the lost inheritance. Finally, they also became one of the 10 major sects of the North Jia this time. Therefore, among these people, it was probably the first time some of them heard of this. Meng Qi stood there silently. No matter what, it had nothing to do with her. She had to go. She retracted her consciousness and scanned her own spiritual sea. In her spiritual sea, the 5-spirit cauldron was still floating. The inner core slowly rotated. Threads of Ling energy first entered the 5-spirit cauldron, and then fell into Meng Qi's spiritual sea. The bamboo scroll that Lin Yan left for her was wrapped in Ling energy. Right now, she still could not see some of the contents, but she had already memorized the parts that she could see. Meng Qi quietly waited for those people to finish discussing. Not only her, Yin Xian and Si Kongxing also did not speak. Those sects with long inheritances also did not have many people speaking. Comparing opportunities was always accompanied by risks. Moreover, the sect leaders who were able to come here had all participated in the auction of the Sky Floating Island. Although most of them did not manage to buy the Jade Scroll to Sky Beyond Heaven, who knew what would happen next if they could enter the 10 Extremes Mountain? Even if those sects who bought the Jade Scroll ate the meat, they might still be able to get a share of the soup. Therefore, the square was noisy for a while, and a sect leader said, "Thank you for your kindness, sect leader Yan, but since everyone is already here, and we're all cultivators, there's no reason to turn and run when we hear danger." Ha 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 ha. His forthright laughter was indeed echoed by a group of people. Soon someone else said, "Yes, sect leader Yan, we've already thought about it. We won't hesitate or be afraid." Some sect leaders even said, "Since this is a grand opening that only happens once every 10,000 years, then we have to go in and take a look. If we return empty-handed, I'm afraid we'll regret it. Sect leader Yan, don't dissuade us." At this moment, a lazy voice came from the crowd. A middle-aged male cultivator in a green robe strode to the center of the square. It was Ling Ji. There were many people here who knew Ling Ji, and someone immediately greeted him. Ling Ji returned the greeting and strode to Yan Xuanbei's side. Open it, open it. Don't wait. The earlier we climb the mountain, the earlier we can finish and the earlier we can go home. If these children move faster, They might be able to make it in time for this year's longevity festival. There was a burst of laughter in the crowd. When Ling Ji told a joke, people would support him no matter how cold he was. Oh right, where's Mengqi? Ling Ji was already standing beside Yan Shunbei. He was already taller than everyone else. He immediately looked around, looking for Mengqi in the crowd. Mengqi was startled. She had never thought that this senior Ling Ji would actually openly search for her in front of so many people. Mengqi. Ling Ji's eyesight was so good that he quickly found her. The crowd did not see him move. They only saw a green shadow flash, and he landed in front of Mengqi. Are you ready? Ling Ji asked. There were at least 1,000 xiuzhe in the entire square. At this time, everyone's eyes were focused on Mengqi. Mengqi nodded dazedly. It's fine. Climb hard when you go in. If you can't climb anymore, find a place to rest. Then when the 10 Extremes mountain closes, you can come out. As Ling Ji spoke, he raised his right hand. His eyes looked at Mengqi's eyes. His slender right hand stopped in the air, and seemed to tremble slightly. Then Mengqi felt a weight on her head. Ling Ji's hand came down and pressed on her hair. I'll wait here. He smiled slightly at Mengqi. But there was faint worry in the depths of his eyes. The entire square was still silent. Everyone looked dazedly at this scene, as if they were seeing something out of a fantasy. Everyone knew Ling Ji of the Broken Space sect, the most talented sword xiu of the previous generation. The Ling Ji who once created miracles and ignored the dangers of the fallen star sea, killing his way in and out several times. He was also the Ling Ji who was used to being idle like a wild crane. From how he brazenly snatched the position of sect leader of the Broken Space sect from his Shixiang, some people guessed that the sky of Broken Space City was about to change. That Ling Ji who seemed to have lived in seclusion for 18 years, and did not care about worldly affairs, reappeared in everyone's eyes with such a valiant posture. Everyone was guessing why. Everyone looked dazedly at the scene in front of them. So Ling Ji and Mengqi. What the hell was this? Wasn't the Broken Space sect looking for this female xiu before? Ling Ji and Mengqi he. Everyone had a head full of questions, but no one dared to ask Ling Ji. If you want to ask him, you have to ask the sword in his hand first, okay? Ling Ji's sword. How many people dared to take its edge? At this time, some people gradually came to their senses. Ling Ji said to Mengqi that he would wait for her here. So if Mengqi did not come out, what would Ling Ji do? Some people's expressions changed instantly, but some people showed a faint smile on their faces. Okay. Mengqi was stunned for a moment, but still nodded and said in a low voice that only the two of them could hear. Thank you, senior. Since everyone is ready then. As Yan Shunbei spoke, he slowly raised his hand. Behind him, a bright moon rose up along with his movements. If it wasn't for the fact that the sky was already dark and the moon was already rising, Mengqi would almost think that it was the moon in the sky. Si Kongxing stood closer to her, and held Mengqi's hand tighter. Both of them felt the sweat and nervousness in each other's palms. Yan Xian said in a low voice, "This is the mirror moon that I passed down from ancient times." He looked up at the bright moon that was slowly rising with his father's hand. The moonlight poured down like water, enveloping everyone in the square. Mengqi felt a clear feeling sweep through her limbs, and even her spiritual sea, making her feel very comfortable. It was as if the moonlight had touched her, and even her spiritual qi had become more condensed. Yan Xian quietly looked at this scene that he was not unfamiliar with at all. When he was a teenager, although his father did not let him in when the 10 Extremes mountain was opened, he secretly came to the square to watch once. However, there were not so many people at that time. Vaguely, he felt that some things in the trichiliocosm had changed after all. After you go in, Yan Xian said and stuffed a small jade pendant into Mengqi's palm. Hold it and don't put it in the storage brocade bag. This way, even if we are separated, I can still find you. Okay. Mengqi clenched the jade pendant tightly. The bright moon rose higher and higher, but the moonlight gradually faded away. Soon, the cultivators who were standing at the front disappeared as the moonlight faded away. Mengqi saw Xue Chengxian and his sister, Qin Xiaoma, then Li Che, who was with her from the Tsonglang Academy, and Chu Tianfeng, who was standing beside her father. There were originally many people in the square, and each sect could only send 3 people in. Now that there were less than 100 people, even if it did not seem empty, it was not as lively as before. The moonlight faded faster and faster, and soon it reached Meng Qi. She lowered her head and watched the moonlight brush past her fingers, her arms, and finally completely fade away. Meng Qi's vision also gradually darkened as the moonlight left. Finally, she only felt that her vision was black, and her surroundings seemed to have become empty. The mountain wind blew her hair, and Meng Qi's body swayed again, and her feet had already stepped on the ground. She quickly opened her eyes and found that she was standing on a grassland. In the distance, the majestic green mountain towered into the clouds and pierced the sky, as if it had split this place into 2 halves. Was that the 10 Extremes mountain? Meng Qi stared at it for a long time. When she saw it at the mirroring moon sky sect, she did not feel that the 10 Extremes mountain was so majestic. Because after leaving the 10 Extremes mountain, no one knew what happened here. So before the cultivators entered here, they did not know how to climb this mountain. The only thing those cultivators who left here remembered was whether they had reached the top or not. Meng Qi looked around, but did not see Xing and the others. They originally thought that after entering the 10 Extremes mountain, they would be at the foot of the mountain, and then climb up together. They did not expect this place to be so big. She looked into the distance. This grassland was very vast, and she could not see the end at a glance. So this time, there were only 100 or so people who came in. It seemed that everyone was sent to different places. Meng Qi lowered her head and looked at her palm. The small jade pendant was still there. Yin Xian said not to put it in the storage brocade pouch, so she hung it on her belt, and then walked towards the 10 Extremes mountain. Meng Qi had just taken a step forward when a grand and deep voice suddenly sounded beside her ear. That voice seemed to come from the ancient times, distant and empty. "Little friend, stop." Meng Qi obeyed and stopped. She looked around, but still did not see anyone. "From here to the 10 Extremes mountain, there is a total of 100 li," that voice continued. "The entrance to the 10 Extremes mountain is already closed. There are a total of 130 people entering the 10 Extremes mountain this time, and they will be ranked according to the time taken to pass through this 100 li. The 10 Extremes mountain is also 100 li high. The cultivator ranked first can directly climb halfway up the mountain. The rest of the cultivators will appear on the 10 Extremes mountain according to their ranking. The last cultivator will land at the foot of the mountain. Do you understand?" "Yes," Meng Qi responded. "Remember, the shorter the time taken, the better," that voice said again. "Junior understands, thank you, senior." Meng Qi did not know who was speaking, so she simply bowed with her hands folded in front of her. It seemed that Yin Xian would not be able to meet up with her. She just did not know if he could pass through this 100 li senior. Meng Qi saw that the voice did not speak anymore, and bowed again. Junior has a companion. Although he is an insightful emptiness realm cultivator, he is only at the Qi disciple realm now. May I ask if he also wants to pass through this 100 li grassland? "Of course," that voice said. "Little friend, there is no need to worry. This 100 li is not meant to stump everyone. Everyone can pass through. The problems you encounter are also problems that you can solve now." Tomato novel. "All right, thank you, senior." Meng Qi bowed for the last time. "You may begin," that voice said again. Meng Qi took a deep breath and reached out to touch her storage brocade pouch. She could use her storage brocade pouch here. She had already tried it earlier, and even the magic weapons she bought could be taken out at will. In other words, the 10 Extremes mountain did not restrict the methods one could use, only the results. After Meng Qi understood all of this, he strode forward. She had just taken a step when the scenery in front of her suddenly changed. Just a moment ago, it was still a scene of green grass, flourishing and thriving. Now Meng Qi was standing by a swamp. The water in the swamp was very muddy, and it emitted a strange smell. A gray mist pervaded the swamp, and in the mist, there were green and lustrous dots of light, which looked very frightening. It seemed that this was the beginning of the test. She looked into the distance, and could see that there was a road in the middle of the swamp that led straight ahead. It was more appropriate to call it a single plank bridge than a road. It was a road paved with narrow and thin planks, and it looked very dangerous. Meng-Chi took out a handful of medicinal herbs from her storage brocade pouch, and with a wave of her finger, the 5-spirit cauldron flew out of her spirit sea. She threw those medicinal herbs into the 5-spirit cauldron, and with a light flick of her finger, a handful of grade 8 spirit stones were embedded under the 5-spirit cauldron. The spirit stones emitted a faint light, and the 5-spirit cauldron began to churn. In almost the blink of an eye, the medicinal fragrance overflowed from the 5-spirit cauldron. Meng-Chi took a step forward, and her natal magic weapon naturally had some tacit understanding with her. The 5-spirit cauldron immediately flew above her head, and the medicinal fragrance inside rolled and seeped out, completely enveloping Meng-Chi. Chapter 148. Meng-Chi took a deep breath and stepped onto the narrow wooden bridge. Medical cultivators were good at many spells, but there were few spells that could be used to attack and defend. Most of the time, medical cultivators needed to rely on pills to fight. There were many who did what Meng-Chi did. Using a cauldron as a natal magic weapon was a popular choice among medical cultivators. The 5-spirit cauldron emitted light, and medicinal qi gushed out endlessly, completely protecting her inside. Meng-Chi did not walk very fast. Although the person in the Shiju mountain said that they would determine the starting point of the climb based on the time they took to reach the foot of the mountain. However, haste did not bring speed. Meng-Chi walked very steadily. Although the narrow wooden bridge looked shaky, it seemed like it would collapse if the person walking on it used a little more strength. However, walking on it did not feel that way. At this moment, she stood on the bridge and could see the dark green water in the swamp on both sides. The water was very turbid, and now she could see that there were bubbles continuously emerging from the water surface. Every time a bubble burst, it was as if something was broken, and the water surface of the swamp would surge for a moment. There were almost no plants in the swamp, and nothing alive could be seen. After stepping on the wooden bridge, the voice had long disappeared, and the surroundings became lifeless. Only the gray miasma floating in the air was a sign of what had happened here. She did not know what it was like for others. The medicinal qi protected Meng-Chi firmly, and she was not affected at all. As she walked, she paid attention to the situation around her. If everyone encountered a swamp like this in the beginning, it would be easier for medical cultivators, but what about sword cultivators and spell cultivators? Or would there be some changes according to the people who came in? Then, would what she encounter next be similar to this? Would medical cultivators be able to handle it? As Meng-Chi thought about it, she continued walking steadily. Soon, she was very far away from the shore of the swamp. If she turned back now, she might not even be able to see the path she came from. Pop! Another bubble exploded in the swamp. Such things had happened too many times. Meng-Chi only glanced at the swamp from the corner of his eyes, and did not look at it anymore. Pop, 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 pop. The sound of bubbles bursting in the swamp suddenly became more frequent. Previously, it took Meng-Chi 3 or 4 steps for a bubble to pop. But now, she had only taken 1 step, and 7 or 8 bubbles had already popped. Meng-Chi's footsteps did not stop, and his expression became more serious than before. She took another step forward. Pop, 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 pop. The bubbles in the swamp suddenly surged wildly. The murky water seemed to be boiling, and the entire swamp was stirred up. Fantuantang Meng-Chi could even see large amounts of grayish-black gas gushing out of the swamp and merging with the gas floating in the sky. This as Meng-Chi looked even more solemn than before. She had seen such a scene before. When she first met Li Che in her previous life, it was in a similar swamp in the southern land. At that time, the entire swamp was like this. It was as if something terrible had happened. Miasma, poisonous insects, and poisonous gas were all over the sky and the ground. Wherever the dark clouds of miasma and poisonous insects passed, not even a blade of grass grew. Swamp waves. Meng-Chi remembered, this was a swamp wave. Li Che later mentioned to her that every few years, such a change would happen in the swamp, and it was also the most dangerous time. The miasma and poisonous gas, as well as the poisonous insects that were startled by the change in the swamp, would even attack the surrounding towns. Many ordinary residents, as well as those qi refinement or foundation establishment cultivators with lower cultivation, could not withstand such an attack at all. Therefore, every time Songlang Academy encountered such a thing, the entire sect would move out together to help people. Li Che also said that when the swamp wave happened, the most terrible thing was not the poisonous insects that were scattered, but the poisonous gas and miasma that had been accumulated at the bottom of the swamp for many years. Not to mention ordinary people, even core formation cultivators and nascent soul cultivators could not withstand it. This was the 10 Extremes Mountain. Although they were not at the foot of the mountain, it was only a branch of the ancient 10 Extremes Mountain. Meng Qi felt that the swamp wave would definitely not lose to the southern land in horror. She quickly took out a handful of spiritual herbs from her storage brocade bag and threw them all into her 5-spirit cauldron. Ding ding! A few 9th-grade spirit stones were flicked into the 5-spirit cauldron by Meng Qi. The cauldron's belly instantly shone brightly, and the medicinal gas in the cauldron became more and more turbulent. The medicinal gas was no longer transparent, but hung down like a substance, completely enveloping Meng Qi. Kakik. A series of strange sounds came from the swamp beside Meng Qi. It sounded like someone was laughing, but it also sounded like someone was gritting their teeth. It's a little medical cultivator. Kakik. A sharp voice came from the bottom of the swamp. Such fresh and tender flesh, so fragrant. It's been a long time since I've seen a little medical cultivator who looks so tempting. I like the medicinal fragrance on medical cultivators the most. Kakik. Meng Qi flicked her finger, and a 6th-grade magic weapon was already in her left palm. She held her right palm horizontally, and a silver medicinal knife was also in her hand. The sharp voice was still a bit shaky at first, but after a few words, it gradually became smooth. While he was laughing strangely, he continued to say, "Little medical cultivator, since you've already come to Grandpa's place, don't leave. I definitely won't let go of such a fresh and tasty little medical cultivator." Meng Qi quickly scanned her surroundings. She had no idea where the person who spoke was. The voice seemed to come from all directions, but it also seemed to come from the depths of the ground. Accompanied by the waves in the swamp, it made a rumbling sound that sounded like muffled thunder in a place that seemed to be near yet far at the same time. Meng Qi couldn't find the source of the voice, so she simply didn't care. She didn't stop walking, and she walked faster than before. The 5-spirit cauldron began to spin in the air, and medicinal aura poured down like flowing water. At this time, she had already walked to the center of the swamp, where the dark miasma cloud was the darkest and thickest. The 5-spirit cauldron spun faster and faster, and the small cauldron emitted a soft light in the swamp. Although it was far less powerful than the miasma cloud, it forcibly broke a path in the middle. Ha! The sharp voice was silent for a moment, and at this time, it sounded again. "It's the 5-spirit cauldron. Grandpa, I haven't seen a medical cultivator using the 5-spirit cauldron for many years." He originally called Meng Qi Grandpa, but now he suddenly changed the way he addressed her. "Little girl." The voice suddenly asked, "Who taught you the 5-spirit cauldron?" Meng Qi snorted softly. When the voice spoke this time, it seemed to be much closer to her. A terrifying, ice-cold pressure pressed down on Meng Qi's shoulder from above. She felt her legs weaken, and she almost lost her balance. "Oh, I forgot." This time, the voice was a bit further away. "Little girl can't handle it." The dark miasma clouds in the sky started to move quickly. Originally, they were just floating in the air. If a Xiuzha wanted to pass through there, they only needed to know medicine. If their medical cultivation was enough, they could use medicinal aura to protect themselves, and they could steadily walk through. But now, the miasma clouds suddenly swirled, and like a whirlpool, surrounded Meng Qi in the center. The 5-spirits cauldron spun even faster. Amidst the dense ding-ding-ding sounds, Meng Qi, who had some telepathy with the cauldron, felt as if something was hammering on the walls of his spirit sea, causing it to shake violently. In the blink of an eye, cold sweat dripped down Meng Qi's forehead, and her back was completely soaked in an instant. "Little girl, since this seat asked you a question, you should obediently answer. Otherwise, if you can't even pass the first part of this 10,000 li road, there are still 2 parts waiting for you at the back. Do you want to be thrown out of 10 Extremes Mountain?" The voice laughed strangely a few times, and said in an old-fashioned manner. Mengqi didn't plan to speak at all. Who knew who was speaking? And the matter of the 5-spirit cauldron, not only Ji Wujiong, but Yin Qingyan also said not to casually tell others. She thought of Yin Qingyan, and suddenly had an idea. Mengqi put the Realm 6 talisman back into her storage brocade pouch, and took out a handful of spirit medicine. The voice was quite surprised. You can still move. Mengqi flicked her hand, and threw the handful of spirit medicine into the 5-spirit cauldron. Her right hand was already moving quickly. She was drawing a formation. Her 5-spirit cauldron's belly originally had a great fire formation carved on it, but it was just a change. Whether it was miasma, poisonous gas, or the poisonous insects in the swamp, they were most afraid of fire. Moreover, the fire summoned by the great fire formation was one of the most tyrannical flames in the world. Little girl, what are you? The voice was originally neither fast nor slow, and it had the feeling that no matter what Mengqi did, it was just leisurely watching a show. Even though Mengqi had already bent over, and the silver medicine knife in her hand was drawing something quickly, the other party didn't seem to take it seriously at all. Mengqi's movements were nimble to begin with. One had to know that although her cultivation talent wasn't good, her talent in formations made Ji Wujiong extremely shocked at first sight, and he insisted on taking her in as a disciple. In the blink of an eye, the great fire formation landed on the wooden plank bridge. The narrow wooden plank bridge could barely accommodate a complete formation, although it was a change and not the original formation. But it was enough. Since the miasma and poisonous gas could be blocked by her medicine chi before, now it could also. With a boom, red flames soared into the sky. The 5-spirit cauldron suddenly turned upside down, and the last handful of spiritual herbs that Mengqi threw in could increase the intensity of the fire. With the help of the medicine chi, the flames instantly became twice as strong as before. The Li fire, which was already astonishing, burned fiercely, and even the gloomy sky in the swamp was lit up. The poisonous miasma cloud that originally surrounded Mengqi was dispersed by the Li fire, and a graceful green figure flashed through the flames, rushing straight ahead. Little girl, you're not bad. The voice laughed strangely again. But now, even if you don't say it, I've already guessed it. Mengqi pursed her lips, and ran even faster. The 5-spirit cauldron was obtained in the apricot forest barrier, and it could be said that it was passed down by Senior Lin Yan. She didn't believe that this unknown person in the 10 Extremes mountain would be able to guess it. Medicine, formation, and cultivation. Little girl. The voice said again. Why are you running so fast? No matter how fast you run, in this swamp, you can't be faster than me. Oh, Mengqi suddenly understood. Then as long as she left this place, she would be able to get rid of this strange guy. Instantly, her footsteps became even faster. That person moved a few times, but he didn't directly attack her. Later on, his pressure almost hurt her, and he seemed rather nervous. Obviously, in this place, he should be restricted by something, and wouldn't directly attack her. You're from Zhe? That strange person suddenly exclaimed. Little girl, you're actually... Chapter 149. Mengqi did not listen to what he said at all. Anyway, no matter what he said, she treated it as a gust of wind and ran as fast as she could. The grand fire formation could not hold on for too long. The fierce flames behind her had actually started to dim. However, Mengqi had calculated the time. She could definitely rush out of this place covered by the poisonous miasma. Little girl, why are you running? I haven't finished speaking yet. The voice sounded again. Mengqi ignored him. She was dashing forward quickly when her feet suddenly stopped, and she stopped abruptly. On the wooden bridge in front of her, green and lustrous vines drilled out in an instant. They grew almost crazily and formed a wall in the blink of an eye. If Mengqi did not stop, she would have been entangled by those vines. She might even be hanging on the wall now. She exhaled. The strange person who spoke was definitely stronger than her. She did not know how big the gap between them was. If they fought directly, she might not even be able to block one of his hands. Mengqi raised her head and looked at the green and lustrous vine wall. The color of those vines was a little strange. The leaves were verdant and looked especially strange. The wind and waves in the swamp were getting stronger and stronger. The sound of bubbles bursting could be heard one after another, forming a strange melody. At this time, the sky was gloomy. Meng-Chi was the only one in the huge swamp. Her slim figure seemed so small, as if a gust of wind could blow her away. There would be no one here to help her. She must climb that 10 extremes mountain. She must become stronger. Meng-Chi took a deep breath. She raised her hand and threw a handful of spirit herbs into the 5-spirit cauldron. She flicked her fingers, and 7 to 8 rank, 9 spirit stones were stuck on the 5-spirit cauldron's belly. Meng-Chi held the medicine knife horizontally in her right hand. When the spirit herbs in the 5-spirit cauldron were churning, she had already bent down and quickly drew a formation on the ground. Good. That person laughed and said, I want to see what a little girl like you can do. The vines in front of Meng-Chi grew taller and taller. In just a few breaths, it seemed to have grown to the sky. The green leaves on top of it rustled, and countless small, willow-like things fluttered down. The catkins fell to the ground and immediately broke out of the ground. By the time the Meng-Chi array was completed, her surroundings seemed to have been completely invaded by the vines, and the ground was covered in greenery. If it wasn't for the strange green color, it would have looked more vibrant than before. Meng-Chi took a deep breath and took out a handful of 9th-grade spirit stones from her storage pouch. With a wave of her hand, the spirit stones were embedded in the formation she had drawn. With a light flick of her right hand, the 5-spirit cauldron toppled over. The spirit herbs that she had thrown in earlier had already turned into medicinal qi and poured into the formation. The strange man spoke again, his tone full of interest. Little doll, that's a pretty good move. Meng-Chi ignored him. She had learned the array very early on, and it was also taught to her by Yin Qingyan. It could increase the medicinal properties of the herbs. Meng-Chi had used it before, but she had no money at that time, so she could only use ordinary spirit stones, and the power of the array was limited. Now it was completely different from before. Once the array was activated, the light wrapped in medicinal properties rushed towards the vines. Medical cultivators must know how to use poison as well. What Meng-Chi was using now was to mix a few spirit herbs together and refine a medicine that could make most plants in the world wither quickly. With the enhancement of the array's effect, if it was effective, Meng-Chi held the medicine knife horizontally and took out a few more spirit stones with her left hand. The medicinal qi had already rushed towards the vines in front of her. In an instant, the vines, which were still green just now, became withered and yellow where the medicinal qi touched them. Not only did the vines become withered and yellow, but the leaves on them also began to wither and yellow. The leaves quickly broke away from the vines and fluttered to the ground. Meng-Chi breathed a sigh of relief. Without waiting for the leaves to fall, she held the medicine knife horizontally and rushed forward. Her medicine knife's attack power was limited, but at this time, the vines were already withered. When the medicine knife touched them, it immediately cut through the vines as if they were rotten wood. The green figure rushed through the gap that was revealed after the vines were cut. In a moment, she rushed forward for a long distance and left the vines behind her. The strange man laughed strangely again. You run quite fast, and your little brain is also very smart. However, your use of the medicine knife is really not good. Little girl, don't go up the 10 extremes mountain. Stay and follow me. After 10 years, you can go out. I guarantee that you will become a powerhouse who can sweep through a region. Meng-Chi snorted softly, but her footsteps did not slow down at all. 10 years? Not to mention that she did not know who the person was, and whether he was trustworthy. Even if she could really go out after 10 years, it would be too late by then. She did not want to. How about it? Little girl, it's rare that I have the heart to cherish talent. How about you stay? That person said again, his tone gentler than before, with a hint of coaxing. If I pass on all my skills to you, you can sweep through a region with ease. He muttered, and Meng-Chi treated it as passing wind. Little girl. That person continued. You are a medical cultivator, and you know formations, so your 5-spirit cauldron was passed on to little girl Lin Yan, right? I'm not wrong about this, am I? When the two words Lin Yan entered her ears, Meng-Chi slowed down for the first time. Ha ha ha. That person laughed proudly. Lin Yan is a little girl. She has talent, but her temper is very stubborn. Wait. He called Senior Lin Yan a little girl? Meng-Chi was only slow for a moment, but her footsteps sped up again. If this person was not lying to her, then was he an ancient cultivator? Otherwise, why would he call Senior Lin Yan a little girl? Too stubborn, it's a good thing but also not a good thing. That person didn't seem to care if Meng-Chi was listening, and continued to speak. Little girl, don't learn from her. Why is it not a good thing? Meng-Chi asked. Seeing that she finally spoke, that person's tone clearly became excited. Because it's easy to get into a dead end when you encounter a problem, and you might even lose yourself. Little girl, since you are her successor. Oh, that's not right. That person suddenly exclaimed. 10,000 years later. How did you get the inheritance from little girl Lin Yan? You inherited the 5-spirit cauldron then, aren't you? Oh. This is a bit troublesome. He made a big fuss. Meng-Chi faintly guessed that this person might be a powerful ancient cultivator. Hearing his exclamation, she became alert again. Oh, little girl, when you enter 10 Extremes Mountain this time, do you know? No. I can't say. I definitely can't say this. Oh. Meng-Chi casually responded. After that person said that, he quieted down. Although the situation in the swamp was still changing, Meng-Chi had already passed through the place where the poisonous miasma was the thickest, and her heart calmed down a lot. That person didn't speak, and she was happy to take the opportunity to run quickly. Little girl, aren't you curious? What is it that I can't say? If I'm curious, will you tell me? Meng-Chi asked casually. Of course not. This is a big secret, and it's a big secret in 10 Extremes Mountain. I can't tell a little nascent soul cultivator like you. That person said. Then it's useless for me to be curious. I might as well not be curious. Meng-Chi said. Little girl, you're quite interesting. He paused and continued. I kind of understand why Lin Yan gave you the 5-spirit cauldron. If you're in the same generation as her, you should be close friends. Thank you for your praise, Senior. I don't deserve it. Meng-Chi said. You called me Senior. Since you're already calling me Senior, I can't let you suffer a loss. That person said. Seeing that Meng-Chi was casually chatting with him, she was already about to cross the wooden bridge. She could even see the land on the other side of the swamp. As long as she stepped on it, she should have already passed a quarter of the test. Although she didn't know how much time she spent, at least she shouldn't be the slowest. As that person's voice fell, Meng-Chi's eyes flashed. On both sides of the wooden bridge, large green leaves emerged from the surging swamp. Soon flower buds emerged from the green leaves. Just as Meng-Chi took a breath, all kinds of lotus flowers bloomed. The swamp that was covered with dark clouds and looked extremely treacherous earlier, had already become a garden of lotus leaves. On the wooden bridge in front of Meng-Chi, a golden lotus flower broke through the ground. The lotus flower was extremely exquisite and emitted a bright golden light. Little girl. That person said. This is the red karmic fire lotus. Meng-Chi. She had read many books, including many medical and medicinal books passed down from ancient times. This was the first time she had heard the name, red karmic fire lotus. The red karmic fire lotus is a flame more powerful than your leaf fire formation. Not only can it burn everything in the world, but it can also devour your spiritual see and divine sense. Meng-Chi looked at the lotus flower quietly and didn't speak. If you want to leave here, you can only pick it. That person added. Karmic fire is more powerful than leaf fire. If you can pick it, you can integrate it into the leaf fire formation of your 5-spirit cauldron. In the future, when you refine pills, you will be even more powerful. Meng-Chi took a deep breath and didn't move. Of course, if you can't pick it, you may be directly devoured by it. Even your divine sense and spiritual see will dissipate, and you will completely die. It will be as if you never existed in this world. Do you dare to try? That person asked. Meng-Chi looked at the red karmic fire lotus quietly and suddenly smiled. Can I choose not to try? Little girl, you have to have some adventurous spirit. That person laughed. Must I pick it? Meng-Chi didn't move forward. Although she couldn't feel any burning sensation, just standing nearby made her feel uncomfortable. You can also choose to stay and accompany me for 10 years. Little girl, don't be ungrateful. If I didn't see that you have the 5-spirit cauldron and have some relationship with Lin Yan, I wouldn't give you such a good thing. Also, he pretended to be mysterious and said, when you reach the 10 Extremes Mountain, you will know that this red karmic fire lotus has other magical uses. Especially this year's 10 Extremes Mountain, he added. Okay. Meng-Chi looked at the red karmic fire lotus quietly. What was karmic fire? She had never heard of it. Meng-Chi took out a nirvana pill from her storage bag and held it in her left hand. Nirvana pill. Little girl, you have quite a lot of good things on you. That person's eyes were sharp and saw Meng-Chi's pill. Even nascent soul little girls can walk around with nirvana pills now? Great sky demons can't do it. TSK TSK TSK. Meng-Chi didn't say anything. She didn't doubt that this strange cultivator who was talking to her was a powerful person from ancient times. He knew too much. She just didn't know why he was in this branch of the 10 Extremes Mountain. Could it be related to this year's opening of the 10 Extremes Mountain for the first 10,000 years? Little girl, I'll teach you another lesson. Li fire burns the body, karmic fire burns the heart, and it burns your divine sense first. The stronger your Tao heart is, the less you need to fear this karmic fire. That person said. Meng-Chi's heart moved. She suddenly remembered that she seemed to have heard of this thing before. She once read in a book that after a cultivator entered the Mahayana realm, every time they advanced a small realm, they would need to undergo a tribulation. It was just that at that time, the tribulation would no longer be tribulation lightning, but would begin to temper the Tao heart. Tempering the Tao heart used this kind of flame called karmic fire. If one's divine sense and Tao heart could withstand the test, the cultivator's realm would increase. Otherwise, one could die and disappear. Just like that person said, they would be completely turned into ashes as if they never existed. Was this karmic fire? She took a step forward, slowly bent down, and reached out towards the karmic fire red lotus. Her fingers were already about to touch the small golden lotus. The moment her fingertips touched the light surrounding the golden lotus, a strange burning feeling instantly spread from her fingertips to her entire body. Meng-Chi's body froze. Her skin didn't feel anything, but her spirit sea seemed to be burning. Above her spirit sea, a small golden lotus floated there. There was a translucent red flame continuously surging out from the golden lotus. The spirit chi in her spirit sea seemed to have turned into kerosene. It was ignited by this translucent red flame, and it quickly spread. In the blink of an eye, her spirit sea was already a sea of fire. Those flames crazily burned her spirit sea and her naiden. She didn't know when the 5-spirit cauldron had returned to her body, quietly floating above her spirit sea. Those flames also burned the 5-spirit cauldron. In just a moment, the 5-spirit cauldron turned red. This was Meng-Chi's natal magic weapon, and it was connected to her mind. Meng-Chi screamed, "Ah, it was so hot." She had never felt so hot before. Normal fire could never make her feel so hot. This feeling was as if a flame had emerged from the depths of her soul and was roasting her internal organs. It's so hot. Meng-Chi didn't lose her mind. She flicked her fingers and sent a pill into her mouth. The man laughed again, as if he had seen something very pleasant. This is karmic fire, little girl. Anyway, you will experience it when you reach the Mahayana realm. 1200 KSW. Net he laughed happily for a long time before saying, "Have you forgotten what I just said?" What Meng-Chi had just given herself was a pill that could detoxify fire poison. When the pill entered her throat, the burning in her body didn't ease at all. Instead, it was a little more uncomfortable than before. She heard the man's laughter and what he was saying. Karmic fire. Meng-Chi was already a little dazed. She couldn't help but reach out and pull the collar of her green robe. But the heat didn't come from the outside. Loosening the collar didn't have the slightest effect. So hot, so hot. It was not only her spirit sea that was burned, but also her divine sense. After a while, Meng-Chi even became a little dazed. She raised her eyes and looked forward. Her eyes, which had always been clear, became muddled and confused. Hot, this was the only thought left in Meng Qi's mind. The flames burning in her spirit seemed to follow her meridians and blood, and began to sweep through her body, and finally spread to her mind. So hot, Meng Qi exhaled with difficulty. If there was anyone else here, they would only see her standing quietly on the spot, and tearing her collar with her right hand. Nothing else could be seen. There wasn't even a trace of sweat on her forehead. Little girl, why don't you choose to stay? Why do you have to make things difficult for yourself? The man smiled proudly and said, if you stay, you can learn a lot of skills, and you don't have to suffer the pain of being burned by the hellfire. How great is that? No. Meng Qi slowly opened her mouth and said hoarsely. She actually didn't know what she was saying. She only knew that she couldn't compromise like this. She couldn't. She still had very important things to do. She had to climb to the top of the 10 Extremes mountain and become stronger as soon as possible. She had to. Why did she have to become stronger? Meng Qi's vision became blurry. Why was she in a hurry to become stronger? Little girl, stay. I'll teach you a lot of skills. Not only will you not suffer the pain of the hellfire, but you'll also be able to move unhindered after leaving here. Everyone will respect and fear you. The man softened his voice and continued. No. Meng Qi answered purely by instinct. She could only feel the flames in her body that were about to burn her entire body to ashes. Her hair, her eyes, her ears, her heart, these were all going to be burned. Stay. Promise me that you'll stay, and I'll extinguish this fire immediately, okay? You've already done well enough. Be good. The man said again. Have I already done well enough? Meng Qi opened her mouth. Her voice was so soft that it was almost inaudible. Yes, you've already done well enough. If you give up now and choose to stay, no one will blame you. So it doesn't matter. You're still young, and you shouldn't have to suffer the pain of being burned by the hellfire. Is there anyone outside that you can't bear to part with? Before Meng Qi could say anything, the man continued. Is it that little friend who became your Dao companion? You're afraid that he won't wait for you, right? Don't worry, when you're strong enough in the future, you can get any Dao companion you want. Dao companion. That's right. She and Yin Qingyan were already Dao companions. Yin Qingyan. Meng Qi's eyes, which were originally cloudy, suddenly became clear. She wanted to leave this place. She wanted to become stronger. She would never let Qing Yan's Henjun get hurt, because of her again. Because of her he almost, Meng Qi suddenly stood up straight, and her thin shoulders straightened. There was no wind in the swamp. But at that moment, it was as if a gust of wind blew past, and Meng Qi's long hair fluttered. Her eyes were even brighter than before. In her spiritual sea, the red lotus of hellfire spun, and translucent red flames surged out crazily. They were still burning her spiritual sea, her inner core, and her natal Dharma treasure. The first to move was Meng Qi's inner core. That was the source of a cultivator's cultivation. The small inner core also began to spin. Then it was her 5-spirit cauldron. The small cauldron spun faster and faster in her spiritual sea, and a small whirlwind formed. The whirlwind seemed to have a huge suction force. More than half of the translucent flames spewing out of the red lotus of hellfire were sucked into the small cauldron. The red lotus of hellfire also spun faster, and more flames spewed out of it. Although Meng Qi's 5-spirit cauldron was already desperately absorbing the flames, she was only a nascent soul cultivator after all, and her 5-spirit cauldron had not reached the top level. Gradually, the 5-spirit cauldron began to slow down. As soon as the 5-spirit cauldron slowed down, the flames in her body increased. The feeling of her internal organs burning gradually began to occupy her mind again. Ha ha ha, little girl, don't struggle. It's already very difficult for you to have such talent. Stay here. How about this? I'll take a step back. I can help you protect your little Dao companion. And I promise that the red lotus of hellfire will still be yours after 10 years. Then you can take it then, and it won't be so painful. Hellfire. Meng Qi gritted her teeth and said word by word. Isn't it to temper one's Dao heart? Her little face was pale, but at this moment, the corners of her lips curled up slightly, and she revealed a slight smile. Meng Qi was actually not the type of beauty that could topple cities. nor was she the kind of peerless beauty that would amaze people at first sight. But this smile had a kind of soul-stirring beauty. Even that person had forgotten to speak for a moment. Mengqi straightened her back. I will walk my own path. She paused, and her eyes were extremely bright. Then she said, I will also protect my own people. Chapter 150. With a loud bang, it exploded inside Mengqi's body. Her eyes were originally a clear amber color, but now there was a strange red light in them. It was as if something was burning inside and struggling to tear her body apart. It hurt. It was also very hot. But compared to just now, it was already much better. The red lotus of hellfire was still wreaking havoc in her spirit sea, but the scorching heat that seemed to want to devour everything was gradually disappearing. Tisk, the strange person who did not show up, finally made a sound. It's so boring to meet such a little girl. Mengqi snorted softly. The burning golden lotus in her body finally calmed down and finally landed on her spirit sea, floating like a lotus flower blooming on the surface of the water. She slowly exhaled. She was still a little confused about what was going on, but it seemed like she had passed the test. Mengqi's divine sense swept across the golden lotus. Was this considered hers? As if responding to her, the small lotus flower's petals slowly swayed. It was no longer as scorching hot as before, but turned into a leisurely coolness. That coolness spread in her spirit sea and finally wrapped around her inner core. Bit by bit, it seemed to be removing the impurities in her inner core. Mengqi quietly observed this scene. So this hellfire could make her inner core purer? She knew the benefits of this. When a cultivator's realm increased and went through the tribulation, if their Tao heart was not stable or their foundation was not solid, it was very easy for them to go berserk. Mengqi was still fine before. She could be considered to have fought steadily and improved step by step to where she was now. She was a little anxious to go from the golden core to the nascent soul realm, but her foundation was indeed unstable. Mengqi had already thought about it. When she went from the nascent soul realm to the spirit-severing realm, she would be fully prepared. At that time, she would definitely prepare a pile of Dharma treasures or natural treasures that could help her go through the tribulation. Then she would definitely be fully prepared for medicinal pills. If that did not work, she could also hire a few nascent soul cultivators to protect her. But now that she had this red lotus of hellfire, if it could really remove the impurities in her inner core, then she would be more confident. Mengqi was overjoyed. Just this item alone made his trip to the 10 Extremes mountain worth it. Senior. Mengqi was even more grateful to the strange man. She cupped her hands in front of her and said in a clear voice, Thank you, Senior. Humph. That person snorted coldly. Why are you thanking me? But. He changed the topic and asked, When did you find out? What did he discover? Mengqi was a little confused, but he did not ask. To be able to see the red karmic fire lotus, a few conditions must be fulfilled. First of all, your heart towards the Tao must be firm enough. Of course, those who are able to enter the 10 Extremes mountain are usually able to fulfill this requirement. That strange person said. Mengqi nodded. She couldn't help but retract her divine sense and look at the lotus floating in her spirit sea. The golden petals looked delicate and delicate. Who would have thought that this was an antique left behind from the ancient times, and had such a magical effect? Second, that person continued. Your Tao must be pure enough. He paused and said, Nothing else can affect it. No matter what you experience, your heart towards the Tao must not change in the slightest. Oh, this isn't hard at all. A large portion of the juniors that come here every 10 years are well protected. They probably don't know what the hardships of the world are. Mengqi nodded silently again. The Xiozha that were able to enter the 10 Extremes mountain were almost all from large sects, and were the genius disciples that were heavily nurtured in the sect. Other than cultivating, some of them had not even started to go out and experience the world. Therefore, what this senior said was correct. But it's a pity that these little Xiozha that have not experienced wind and rain, and do not know what pain is, completely lost the chance to obtain the red karmic fire lotus. That person laughed happily. Otherwise it would be too easy for them. It wouldn't show the preciousness of our red karmic fire lotus. This is a true treasure of heaven and earth. Those so-called treasures of heaven and earth outside are trash in front of it. Little girl. That person did not wait for Mengqi to speak this time, and asked again, "You look so young and delicate, how can you meet this condition? It's really strange." Was it because she had died once? Mengqi stood on the wooden bridge in a daze, and did not know how to answer this question. "Forget it, you're a stubborn and boring little girl. You probably won't answer even if I ask you. If the first two conditions are met, then you have about a 1 in 10,000 chance of seeing the red karmic fire lotus," that person said again. "Oh," Mengqi responded. Then her luck was really good. Even a 1 in 10,000 chance of meeting it. She raised her eyebrows slightly, and revealed a faint smile. "What oh?" At this time, shouldn't you be asking, "Why can you meet the 1 in 10,000 chance?" That person seemed to be angry again. 1 in 10,000, do you really think your luck is that good? Senior, Mengqi cupped her hands again. "Why can I meet the red karmic fire lotus?" "Because there's a third condition." That person said slowly. "You must save enough people." Of course, this seems to be an advantage for medical cultivators. However, 10 Extremes Mountain is absolutely fair. Sword cultivators and spell cultivators can save people from vicious beasts and villains. This is also considered saving people. I see. Mengqi nodded again. Besides, there's a fourth condition. That person said again. At this point, he purposely stopped and did not continue. Mengqi waited for a while, and could only ask again, "Senior, may I ask what the fourth condition is?" "Humph." That person snorted again and then said, "If you combine the second and third conditions, it'll be the fourth condition." Mengqi was startled, and did not react for a moment. That person's tone suddenly became serious. Cultivation is originally going against the heavens. If your Tao heart is not firm, you definitely can't touch the peak of the great Tao. Only people who can still have a pure heart no matter what they experience are qualified to receive the favor of the red karmic fire lotus. Do you understand? Mengqi stood in place in a daze. She understood a little, but also a little. So I find it quite interesting that you can pass the test at such a young age. And you're only a nascent soul cultivator. This is not an easy task. 10 Extremes Mountain has opened so many times, and I've been here for more than 10,000 years. The number of people who can obtain the red karmic fire lotus can be counted with 2 hands. That person had indeed been here for a long time. It was not easy for him to find someone to talk to, so he naturally spoke more. The last time, it was, let me think, it was a few hundred years ago. It was your Tao companion. Mengqi was stunned again when she heard this, and subconsciously asked, "My Tao companion?" Yes. When he was still a little white tiger in the spirit severing stage. That person continued, "He came to 10 Extremes Mountain to take the red karmic fire lotus. And then it was you, as senior." Mengqi was very calm just now, but now she stuttered for some reason. "He's not considered my Tao companion." "What do you mean not considered?" That person did not understand. That's. Mengqi did not know what to say. Her little face was slightly red. After a long time, she finally stuttered. It's because of some reasons at that time that we became Tao companions." "Oh." That person dragged out his voice. "Contract a Tao companion? That guy's cultivation level should be much higher than yours." They slept together, and dual cultivated. He said it's just a contract. Why does it sound a little trashy? Mengqi's face flushed red. She actually did not think much of these things. Previously, she had seriously discussed the pros and cons of dual cultivation with Yan Qingyan, but when she heard the senior say this, she only felt her cheeks burning. That's not it either. She hurriedly stopped this senior from continuing to make wild guesses. Mengqi thought for a while and said seriously, "He's a very good person." "You're not bad either." That person said, "Those who can get my red karmic fire lotus are all very good cultivators." "Not trashy," Mengqi immediately said again. "Oh," that person responded again. "Little girl, if you didn't get the red karmic fire lotus, I would have thought that you were deceived. He never deceived me, Meng Qi said again. This time her tone was exceptionally firm. Yin Qingyan had never lied to her. Even when he concealed his identity when they met in their previous life, he only did not tell Meng Qi his true identity. However, the words that came out of his mouth had never been a lie. Thinking back to when they first met, Yin Qingyan said that he came from the West Kingdom, and that he was from a cultivation sect that Meng Qi did not know about. It was not a lie. Meng Qi imagined that he came from a hidden sect in the West Kingdom, so it was not a lie. Forget it, that person said. This lord has known about the fun between children for 10,000 years, but I don't understand it. Meng Qi. She felt that she should explain, but it did not seem necessary. Sigh, although you're stubborn and boring and you're not very good at chatting, you're still the second person this lord has met in the past few hundred years that I can talk to. Then the previous one, was it him? Naturally. That person sighed again in melancholy. To be honest, he's even worse at chatting than you are. You're obedient enough, but he. What about him? Meng Qi asked curiously. There was a voice in her heart reminding her to leave this place quickly. She was still in the test of the 10 Extremes mountain. However, when she heard him mention Yin Qingyan, and it was Yin Qingyan that she did not know about, Meng Qi's body stood firmly and did not move. Yes, he almost killed me and forced the red karmic fire lotus on me, that person said. Meng Qi. Of course, it's impossible for this lord to be hurt by a little white tiger that was distracted. That person said again. But that arrogant brat, TSK, this lord probably won't forget him even after 10,000 years. Meng Qi could not help but smile. So Qing Yan's Henjun had such a side to him? However, his talent is really amazing. I heard from my friend that he entered the 10 Extremes mountain again to fight for the Demon Monarch token. Moreover, he succeeded in one go, that person said again. Senior? Meng Qi asked. Do you also think that his talent is very good? It's more than amazing, that person said. The strength that he displayed that day was the first in 10,000 years. We all thought that the 10 Extremes mountain would reappear because of him. He would be the only cultivator in 10,000 years with the hope of ascending from the Mahayana realm. However, the strange thing is... What's strange? Meng Qi hurriedly asked. That person murmured. I just heard from my friend that he entered the 10 Extremes mountain again in the fight for the Demon Monarch token. But his cultivation seemed to be weaker than it was 100 years ago. Moreover, his great Tao was damaged. What exactly did he experience in these 100 years? Meng Qi's heart thumped fiercely. His great Tao was damaged? This was an injury that she had never heard of as a medical cultivator. Just hearing these words from that senior's mouth made Meng Qi panic. It was as if there was a huge copper bell that was constantly being struck in her head, making her a little dazed. Those words seemed to be pulled out of her mind at any time. Senior. Meng Qi hurriedly composed herself and asked respectfully, Great Tao. She tried very hard to open her mouth, but she could not say those words. Anyway, once you leave here, you will forget all of this. You will only remember that you got the red karmic fire lotus. There's no harm in telling you. That person laughed. Thank you, Senior. In fact, Meng Qi also knew that after leaving the 10 Extremes mountain, she would forget all of this. However, she still wanted to know. Moreover, she already had a faint guess in her heart. Why was Yin Qingyan injured so badly when they first met? After he was treated in the Starfall Sea, she did not know if his injuries were completely healed. At that time, regardless of whether Yin Qingyan's cultivation had fully recovered or not, he was already far superior to her. She could not treat him at all. So he was not healed? Meng Qi recalled that when they met again, he still looked so calm and composed. It was impossible to tell that he was injured at all. However, the great Tao had, as soon as she thought of these words, the big bell in her head began to ring crazily again. She only felt that her ears were full of buzzing sounds. And in an instant, she was in a state of confusion. She even almost forgot those words. A cultivator's cultivation is going against the heavens. In fact, it is also following the will of heaven. That person said slowly. Speaking of this, his tone became more serious. The so-called tribulations and cultivation are actually tests. Only in adversity can there be growth. However, we still follow our own path. As long as we are firm in our heart and our own path, we can always move forward. Yes. Mengqi nodded obediently. A cultivator who truly goes against the heavens dares to go against the will of heaven. They want to jump out of the will of heaven, and even jump out of their own path. Such a cultivator's path will be damaged. That person said. So, Mengqi lowered her head and looked at her hands. Her fingers were slender, white and slender. Her nails were neatly trimmed, and her fingertips were slightly red. If one held her hands, they would be able to feel the warmth of her hands. This was a pair of living hands full of vitality. It's going against the will of heaven, that's why it's big. Ah. Before Mengqi finished speaking, she suddenly screamed and squatted down. Huh. That person suddenly exclaimed softly, and his tone was a little surprised. I just found out. Although this isn't a path that a nascent soul cultivator like you can pry into, it shouldn't be that you can't even mention it. Unless. Mengqi only felt a splitting headache, as if something was directly pressing on her head, making it difficult for her to even think. His ears were buzzing, and he didn't even hear the words that the man said later. After a while, she finally recovered. Mengqi slowly stood up. A few strands of hair wet with sweat stuck to her forehead, and the back of her green robe was also soaked. Thank you, Senior, she said in a trembling voice, but her mind was blank. She still remembered that she was talking about Yun Qingyan with this senior, but her mind was in a trance, and she didn't know what they were talking about. She couldn't remember what they had just said at all. That person suddenly sighed softly. It's time to move on. Yes. Mengqi bowed to the void. Thank you for the lotus, Senior. I'll take my leave now. Go ahead. That person said. I haven't talked to anyone for hundreds of years. Thank you very much. Mengqi shook her head. She remembered that she got the red lotus of hellfire, and before her, it was Yun Qingyan who got the red lotus of hellfire. And then? She walked forward quickly. What else did they say? That senior said that Qingyan's Henjun was wild, powerful, and extremely talented. And then? She reached out and hit her head. She remembered what else they said, but why couldn't she remember it at all? Mengqi knew that such a situation happened because there were some things that she couldn't pry into yet. But she vaguely felt that this was a very important thing to her, and she should remember it. In a daze, Mengqi stepped off the wooden bridge and stood on the shore of the swamp. She looked back. The sky was still gloomy here, but the swamp that seemed to be boiling just now had completely calmed down. She could only see a thick poisonous miasma cloud in the center of the swamp. Mengqi stared in that direction for a moment, then bowed to the center of the swamp, then turned and walked forward. Her footsteps were firm, and she walked quickly. After a moment, she walked out of the swamp. Mengqi's eyes suddenly lit up. She found that she had returned to the grassland. The sky was still blue, and the Shijua mountain in the distance was still majestic. She stepped on the soft grass and looked around. The only difference was that this place was no longer empty. On the grass around Mengqi, some were standing, some were sitting, and there were even 7 or 8 Shijua who were lying on the grass. She didn't know some of these people, but they looked very familiar. They were all Shijua she had seen in Jinghua heaven before. Mengqi, a woman in red who was lying on the ground, suddenly jumped up and rushed towards her. You finally came out. Xing was similar to Mengqi. A few strands of sweaty hair stuck to her forehead. Her originally beautiful face was a bit messy, and she looked a bit embarrassed. Phew. She reached out and grabbed Mengqi's arm. I knew you would be fine, Xing. Mengqi smiled at her. She looked around and didn't see the figures of her other friends. She asked, Did you see the others? No. Xing shook her head. But I heard from the people of the Wind League that Shui Qingxian has already gone to the next level. Mengqi nodded and looked around again. She didn't need to worry about the others, only Yan Xian. She didn't know if he was gone. But we can rest here. It's okay. I have already asked the senior who guided us. The time spent will only start from when you enter the test. So if you are injured or exhausted, it's okay to rest here. Okay. Mengqi nodded. She had already looked around at everyone who was still here, but she still couldn't find Yin Xian. Ming-Chi, are you looking for someone? Xing followed her gaze and looked around. I'll help you. Okay, he is. Ming-Chi hadn't finished speaking when a black figure suddenly appeared on the grass not far from her. That person was still wearing a cloak, completely hiding his face in the shadow of the hood. Only his exposed jaw could be seen. Is it him? Xing also guessed who Ming-Chi was looking for and quickly asked in a low voice. It should be. Ming-Chi nodded. Those who could enter the 10 Extremes mountain didn't need to be like this, except for Yin Xian. She walked towards the cloaked person. That person obviously noticed Ming-Chi and turned to look at her. You're out. Ming-Chi walked to his side and asked in a low voice. Are you okay? Yes. The cloaked person was Yin Xian. I can handle it. He suddenly raised his hand slowly and stared at his palm. He said in a low voice, just now. Yes? Ming-Chi tilted her head slightly and looked at his palm. What did you encounter? Yin Xian suddenly raised his head and looked at Ming-Chi. A poisonous swamp. Ming-Chi said. I see. Yin Xian nodded and looked at Xing who was beside Ming-Chi. What about you? Me, Xing said. Just now? There were so many enemies. My hands were tired from killing them. She waved her hand and said. And they all looked like the person I hate the most. Humph. Ming-Chi tilted his head slightly. It seemed that each person's situation was different. And according to what that person had said before, it was enough for them to handle. Just now Yin Xian raised his head slightly and let the sunlight fall on the lower half of his face. Let's talk somewhere else. As he spoke, he walked towards a place further away from the resting Xiuzha. Ming-Chi and Xing followed him over. The three of them simply sat on the ground on the grass, forming a circle. I just recovered my peak strength. Yin Xian still did not take off his hood, and said in a low voice. Xing was shocked. So you've recovered? She hurriedly asked. Of course her voice was still small. No. Yin Xian grimaced. I just recovered temporarily when I was going through the test. Then what did you encounter? Xing hurriedly asked. Ming-Chi couldn't help but look at her with a smile. Xing was probably a very interesting person to chat with. If that elder had encountered her, he would have been very happy. Yin Xian took a deep breath and said faintly, I encountered the thing I didn't want to encounter the most. He grimaced and said, the battle before I was injured. Xing exclaimed in surprise, with the Mo world? Yes, Yin Xian said, so I fought again. And then? Xing asked, this time in the end. Ming-Chi did not speak and only looked silently at Yin Xian's hand. The youth's hand was larger than hers and Xing's. His fingers were long and slender. Even though his cultivation had fallen to Lianqi, his fingernails were still neatly trimmed and looked dry and strong. But this time the Mo Xiao were stronger. Yin Xian said, so strong that I felt that I could not have lasted that long. I would have fallen very quickly. But you didn't, Ming-Chi said. Since Yin Xian had passed the test, he definitely did not fall. Yes, Yin Xian said. I didn't fall. I actually persisted. I don't even know why I persevered. In fact, midway, someone told you to give up and ask for help, right? Ming-Chi asked. Yes, they told me to leave first. They said that they could organize enough people to come back, Yin Xian said. Then why didn't you leave? Because that person said that they could organize enough people to come back. He paused and said slowly, come back and take revenge. Since it was revenge, then it must be because he left. Some people died, and there were quite a few of them. So I don't know why. I clearly couldn't beat them and couldn't have lasted that long, but I still persevered. Yin Xian continued, by the time I reacted, the Mo Xiao were all dead. He said with difficulty, passed the test. Congratulations. Ming-Chi smiled at him. Ming-Chi. Yin Xian lowered his head and looked at his hand. I also got a lotus. That person told me that a little medical cultivator named Ming-Chi also just got one. Ming-Chi wasn't very surprised that Yin Xian got the red hellfire lotus. After all, according to that senior, Yan Xian met all the conditions. So he also met that senior? Then, Mengqi almost jumped up. Your injury. She reached out and held Yan Xian's arm. Maybe there's a way. Huh. Only Si Kongxing was confused. Lotus? What lotus? That person said it's called the Red Hellfire Lotus, Yan Xian said. He subconsciously pulled his hood higher and looked into Mengqi's eyes, as if he wanted to know if she was joking with him. Red Hellfire Lotus. What's that? Si Kongxing looked at Mengqi in confusion and then at Yan Xian. I don't have it. Yes. Mengqi didn't know how to explain. It needs to meet some conditions to get it. Is that so? Si Kongxing blinked and nodded. I understand. So Mengqi, will he get better? Yuwenba. Net well. Mengqi lowered her head and pondered. She was just guessing. Hellfire tempered the Taoist heart, and a cultivator's Taoist heart was hidden in the inner core. For her, the red hellfire lotus could make her inner core purer. But for Yan Xian, it might be able to repair his damaged inner core. Mengqi's mind stirred. In the air above the spirit sea, the bamboo slip that Senior Lin Yin gave her suddenly shook a few times. She withdrew her divine sense and scanned the bamboo slip. Maybe I can give it a try. Mengqi said, but you're an insightful emptiness realm cultivator. You have to wait until my medical skills reach at least the 5th realm. I've waited for 2 years. There's no hurry. Yan Xian's expression had already calmed down, and he said with a smile. He smiled at Mengqi, and seemed to want to say something. But his gaze suddenly turned cold, and he jumped up from the ground, blocking in front of Mengqi and Si Kongxing. Be careful. Mengqi looked up and saw 5 rather tall young male cultivators walking towards them side by side. I was still thinking that martial uncle sect leader was actually willing to ignore his own son, and didn't give you a spot this time. It turns out that he secretly sent you in, junior martial brother. The cultivator walking in the middle of the 5 people said. He was wearing a dark brown robe with a small crescent moon embroidered on the left chest. He was also called junior martial brother Yan Xian, so he should be from Jinghua heaven. He wasted a spot to let his useless son enter the 10 Extremes mountain. Our martial uncle sect leader is really selfless. That person looked at Yan Xian and said slowly. Chapter 151. Mengqi and Si Kongxing's expressions both changed. This was the 10 Extremes mountain. Everyone knew that as long as they left here, they wouldn't remember anything that happened in the 10 Extremes mountain. This was also the reason why Yan Shunbei couldn't make up his mind to send Yan Xian in. Even though he knew that as long as he could ascend the 10 Extremes mountain, there would be hope to repair his son's inner core. Mengqi and Si Kongxing looked at each other again. Her hand was already touching the storage brocade bag at her waist. It wasn't the first time Si Kongxing and her had fought side by side. Seeing her finger move, she guessed her intention. She also slowly raised her hand, ready to jump up and attack at any time. Mengqi and Si Kongxing were still blocked behind Yan Xian. However, the two were already prepared to fight, one on the left and one on the right. Ha! That Mirror Moon Heaven disciple who spoke rudely smiled coldly. Shitty, are you waiting for a woman to protect you? Yan Xian's face under the hood turned ashen. He was once the #1 genius of Mirror Moon Heaven. He was also a rare genius cultivator in the world. He became famous at a young age and naturally had his pride. However, in these 2 years, he didn't know how many grievances he had suffered. He knew that he couldn't say anything. He also knew that his father was doing this to protect him. However, the proud genius of the past was looked down upon and stepped on by those who were far inferior to him. People who had never experienced this feeling would not be able to empathize with him. At this time, a gust of wind came from somewhere and lifted Yan Xian's cloak. The hood covering his face was pulled down, revealing Yan Xian's handsome face. Xixiang sure. Yan Xian's expression became calm. Xixiang doesn't dare. Xixiang sure sneered. Shitty is the hope of our sect. We are destined to be your stepping stones. How can we dare to be called Xixiang? His tone was sharp and unkind. It seemed that he had accumulated resentment towards Yan Xian for a long time. After Xixiang sure finished speaking, he suddenly turned his head and said loudly, "Everyone come and see." Mirror Moon Heaven's former genius Yan Xian also came to the 10 Extremes Mountain. "Aren't you all coming to see him?" His voice was very loud. The grass was originally empty. His voice spread far and wide, and everyone heard it clearly. Those who were able to come here were all outstanding talents of the various large sections. They had more or less heard of Yan Xian's reputation as a genius. Of course, there were also many people who knew that his cultivation had fallen in the past 2 years, and he was no longer the genius he used to be. Mengqi. How could he be like this? Even if there was no friendship between the two of them from the same sect, this wasn't just dislike, it was simply enmity. Why are you like this? While Mengqi was still thinking about it, Xing directly shouted, "You? Do you know?" Mengqi's heart stirred, and he suddenly took a step forward. If these people could use the rules of the 10 Extremes Mountain to humiliate and bully Yan Xian, they could do the same. Yan Shunbei didn't announce this to the world. Even in the Mirror Moon Heavenly Gate, only he and a few elders knew about it. It was only to protect Yan Xian. However, they were currently in the 10 Extremes Mountain. After leaving this place, no one would remember anything that happened. Knowing and not knowing were the same. Everyone. Senior brother sure cupped his hands and said loudly, "I'm sure everyone knows that my junior brother Yan Xian used to be a genius. However, later on he was tainted with demonic qi and returned to the sect. From then on, he didn't want to improve, and his cultivation began to fall." When he said this, he deliberately paused and waited for more people to gather before continuing. "Our sect master martial uncle, who is my junior martial brother Yan Xian's father, and junior martial brother Yan Xian himself, are unwilling to tell everyone what exactly happened. However, there's no such thing as an airtight wall in the world. Our junior brother Yan Xian was obviously entangled with a female demonic cultivator. That's why he was tainted by demonic qi. His Dao heart was shaken, and his Dao collapsed, resulting in him falling into this state." Senior brother Shi's tone was full of resentment, and his guess was even more absurd. He looked at Yan Xian gloomily and said, "Junior sister Wu admires you, but you would rather fool around with a female demonic cultivator than ignore her. You fell into this state because of your arrogance. You only have yourself to blame. You deserve it." Mengqi was stunned. "Hey." Xing was furious. He looked at Yan Xian, clenched his hands by his side, and said loudly, "What are you talking about? Do you know?" "Ha ha ha ha." Senior brother Shi sneered and said, "Of course I know. Fellow Taoist, don't be fooled by his face. He's now penniless. Why do you have to protect him?" Mengqi could tell that there was indeed a personal grudge between senior brother Shi and Yan Xian. He mentioned junior sister Wu. It seemed that this grudge was related to junior sister Wu. At this time, almost all the cultivators who hadn't entered the next level had gathered around the two of them. Mengqi looked around and immediately saw Chu Tianfeng and Qin Xiuma. Behind Qin Xiuma, Li Che was also smiling at her. She calmed down a little. This way, she wouldn't have to worry too much even if they turned hostile and fought later. Senior brother Shi had 4 companions and so did they. Everyone. Senior brother Shi hadn't finished speaking yet. In these 2 years, junior brother Yan Xian didn't even return to the sect. He spent all his time in the marketplace, getting drunk and cultivating. I think he's already forgotten that he's a cultivator. However, our sect leader martial uncle still gave him a chance to enter the 10 Extremes Mountain. He paused and continued. As everyone knows, the 10 Extremes Mountain opens every 100 years. Only 3 disciples from each sect can enter the 10 Extremes Mountain. In addition, our Jinghua Sky has some spots for rogue cultivators. However, how can junior brother Yan Xian be worthy? Everyone started to whisper to each other as soon as brother Shi's words came out. People's gazes towards Yan Xian gradually became unfriendly. It was indeed a waste to give such a chance to someone who only knew how to drink and play all day and didn't think about cultivation. Especially, this person relied on the fact that he was the son of the sect leader to openly snatch a chance from others. However, he let a truly hard-working cultivator, who should have been able to enter, lose such a chance. This feeling was really terrible. Senior brother sure looked around smugly. He knew that his words had already taken effect and aroused everyone's anger. Using one's identity to do whatever one wanted, snatching another's chance, yet not being worthy of the position. This was the most infuriating thing. Therefore, as a member of Jinghua Sky, this one asks everyone. Right now he only has Lianqi cultivation. It is impossible for him to ascend the 10 Extremes mountain by himself. Please do not help him, and let him fend for himself here. After senior brother sure finished speaking, he bowed again. When he lowered his head, his lips curled up even higher, a hint of viciousness flashing through his eyes. He wouldn't give junior brother Yan Xian a chance to turn things around. Definitely not. Yan Xian heard this but still didn't say a word. His hands hanging by his side had long been clenched. The veins on the back of his hands were bulging, looking very vicious and terrifying. Si Kongxing suddenly jumped up shouting, "Hey, you!" Meng Qi reached out to grab Si Kongxing's arm, pulling her back and lightly shaking his head at her. Meng Qi. Si Kongxing turned to look at him in confusion. Meng Qi lightly shook his head at her again, and then quickly blinked his eyes. "What about me?" Senior brother sure said. "Are they allowed to do such disgusting and despicable things, and I'm not allowed to speak about it? Just because he's from the same sect as me, I can only watch such things happen, and can't speak up for others?" That senior brother sure sneered. "Aren't we Xiuzhi supposed to see injustice on the road, and cultivate for the world, for everyone, and for the great Tao?" His last sentence was said in a dignified manner, and instantly attracted many people's agreement. Someone who knew senior brother Sure immediately said, "What Daoist Sure said is too true." Letting such a self-deprecating trash enter this place means that a truly outstanding cultivator, who should have entered this place, will lose his chance. If we all hold back and don't speak about such things, it will only become more and more serious in the future. I'm a small Xiuzhi from an ordinary sect, and completely through my own efforts, I obtained the favor of the 10 great sects and was recruited. It was also through my own efforts that I obtained the opportunity to enter 10 Extremes Mountain today. If everyone is like fellow Yen and his father, I'm afraid I'll be one of the people who should be rejected outside the door. Then, I definitely won't accept it. So I support senior brother Sure. Me too. A guy who can only rely on his father doesn't deserve to be here. Brother Yen, if it was you 2 years ago, I would wholeheartedly accept it. But now, why do you have to do this? Say, seeing everyone criticizing Yan Xian, that senior brother Sure was even more pleased. He stood with his hands behind his back and changed his attitude instead. Junior brother Yan, you withdraw yourself now. Fellow Yan, we're ashamed to be in the same group as you. Withdraw yourself. That's right, don't make us force you to leave. Get out. Leave here. You don't deserve it. Get out. The more Si Kongxing watched, the more anxious she became. She stomped her feet, and looked like she was about to rush up and speak up for Yan Xian. Meng Qi pulled her arm again. Meng Qi. Si Kongxing stomped her feet. Don't be anxious, Meng Qi said. Her gaze swept across everyone's faces again, but she heard senior brother Sure suddenly say, "These two were sent in by martial uncle to help junior brother Yan, right? I've seen you in the sect." Senior brother Sure stared at Meng Qi maliciously. "Please leave together with them," he said coldly. Damn, entering 10 Extremes Mountain with 2 assistants. This #1 magic cultivation sect of the 4 realms sure has a big style. You can't say that. The one who has a big style is Mirror Moon Heaven, but this sect's son. That's right, this matter can't implicate others. Watch your words. The 3 of you should leave now. Senior brother Sure took a step forward and said slowly, "Don't stay here and make everyone unhappy." His gaze flickered, and he was not aggressive towards Meng Qi and Si Kongxing. However, every time he looked at his junior brother, the hatred in his eyes could be clearly seen by Meng Qi and Si Kongxing. Meng Qi. Si Kongxing pulled Meng Qi's sleeve again, and kept winking at her, indicating for her to speak quickly. Meng Qi was about to speak, but her eyes suddenly lit up. Not far behind Qin Xiaoma and the others, on the grass, a young man in a black robe stood tall. Even if he did not speak or move, he was full of spirit. Pei Mufeng had also arrived. Mengqi nodded lightly at him, and he nodded back. She was waiting for Pei Mufeng. Just the few of them were not enough. Mengqi was a nobody, and although Chu Tianfeng and Qin Xiaoma were outstanding disciples in the sect, it was still not enough. The cultivators here would not listen to their words. Pei Mufeng, however, was different. He was the sect master of one of the top 10 sections. Although he was young, his identity alone was already above many people here. The weight of his words was different from theirs. Moreover, Pei Mufeng's reputation for keeping his word was well known in the 3,000 worlds, and everyone respected him. Do you know why fellow Taoist Yan Xian was injured? Mengqi took a step forward and said to Senior Brother Shi. Senior Brother Shi chuckled. I know you're going to defend him. Are you going to say that it's not as I said? That he returned to the sect full of demonic energy, indulged in wine and women, and did not want to improve because he was injured in the battle with demonic cultivators? That's strange. If that's the case, why didn't Martial Uncle say it? Why didn't he say it himself? Moreover, he looked coldly at Mengqi and said, for us cultivators, even if we're really injured, can we abandon our Tao heart just because we're seriously injured? What about his Tao? Did he just throw the teachings of the sect to the back of his mind? If he's willing to degrade himself just because he's injured, even if he still has his cultivation today, I still have to say that such a person is not worthy of entering the 10 Extremes mountain. I'm still ashamed to be associated with him. Well said. Someone immediately said loudly, Mengqi, you don't have to say anything to them. Yan Xian said lightly. Then leave Junior Brother Yan Xian. Senior Brother Shi looked at him coldly. Don't force us to make a move. When he spoke, he purposely emphasized the word us. It was as if he was reminding Mengqi and the others that they should be on his side. Since I came in, I didn't plan to leave like this. Yan Xian stood upright and looked at his senior brother quietly. I won't leave by myself. Then don't blame us. After Senior Brother Shi finished speaking, he walked towards him with a cold smile. We don't want your life either. You just have to leave here and return justice and clarity to the 10 Extremes mountain. A person beside Senior Brother Shi said passionately. Please leave. Yes. Leave here and return justice to the 10 Extremes mountain. Yes. Fellow Taoist Shi is right. No matter what the reason is, since you're a cultivator, even if you're injured, even if you're wronged, where's your Tao heart? Where's your Tao? Don't you want it anymore? Then you don't deserve to be a cultivator. Xing, Mengqi. The two of them looked at each other and were a little speechless. Compared to Senior Brother Shi, they were really a little naive. She thought quickly and looked at those people who were getting closer and closer. Suddenly she had a thought. Mengqi was about to say something. A burst of strange laughter suddenly came from all directions of the grassland. No one knew where the laughter came from, and no one knew who was laughing. That laughter was extremely strange. It was clearly very pleasant to the ears, like a mountain stream or a mountain stream, like a flowing mountain. However, it sounded so ear-piercing. It was as if the person was deliberately laughing like this just to cause trouble. Mengqi and the others felt extremely uncomfortable when they heard it. Who is it? Senior Brother Shi was the first to look around. Which senior is it? Please show yourself. Why should I show myself to you? I'm just laughing because I heard something funny. You guys can continue. It wasn't the person who gave her the red karmic fire lotus. Mengqi said silently in her heart. Although they all liked to laugh strangely, their voices were quite pleasant, and they all called themselves this lord. The person who laughed now wasn't the senior she met in the swamp earlier. Senior Brother Shi's gaze turned slightly cold. May I ask what's so funny? The 10 Extremes mountain is fair and just? A group of immature children who entered the 10 Extremes mountain for the first time dare to talk nonsense here. You even tried to represent the 10 Extremes mountain to judge others. That person laughed wildly again. The last person who tried to do this. Alright, the last person who tried to do this. The grass on his grave is already 2 feet tall. Who are you? This time, Senior Brother Shi's face turned ashen. He originally thought that it was a senior that he couldn't afford to offend, but after listening to his words, he felt that it didn't seem like it. He was a disciple of Mirror Moon Heaven, and he knew that the 10 Extremes Mountain was a holy land passed down from ancient times. Those who could speak here were mostly powerful people from ancient times. However, how could there be someone who spoke with such a strange tone and sounded especially unreliable? The 10 Extremes Mountain is a place where everyone relies on their own abilities. It doesn't forbid killing, conspiracies, and all kinds of despicable tricks that you don't dare to use outside can be used here. Otherwise, why would we cover it up for you, making you forget what happened here as long as you leave? That person continued. In the end, you want the 10 Extremes Mountain to be fair and just? I'm dying of laughter. It's really too funny. Ouch, my stomach hurts. That person laughed wildly again. If you want to get rid of your dissidents, then do it openly and openly. No, I'll do it. Don't talk about propriety, righteousness, benevolence, and filial piety in my 10 Extremes Mountain. Bullshit. Meng Qi and Sikong Xing looked at each other and saw some surprise in each other's eyes. Was this person encouraging them to kill each other? If there are people who don't like their fellow disciples, such as this guy, they can take revenge in the 10 Extremes Mountain. Don't worry, even if he dies in your hands, as long as he leaves this place, no one will know that you killed him. As that person spoke, his voice became softer and softer, and also more and more pleasant to listen to, filled with an indescribable bewitchment. It was like a warm breeze blowing past your ears, and also blowing past your heart. Some things that were originally hidden very deeply, some things that were usually forcefully hidden by oneself, and could not be seen by others. Slowly, that breeze blew away the covering on these things, and slowly exposed them. Please make your move. That person sighed, and said leisurely, as long as you leave here, no one will know what happened. Even if you cut off one of his hands now, even if you push your fellow disciples down the cliff to reach the top, no one will know. Don't worry. As if to make a note of his words, a scream suddenly sounded. This person, Yin Xian suddenly said loudly, is a spell cultivator. He used spells. This is bewitchment. His voice was actually not soft, although he was only at the Qi disciple level. He was still a cultivator after all. Originally, other cultivators had already gathered around them. Logically speaking, everyone should be able to hear what he said. But at this moment, it was as if no one heard what he said. The cultivators who were still coldly looking at Yin Xian and telling him to get out had already changed their target at this moment. They all looked at the people around them, those familiar yet unfamiliar, the fellow disciples who grew up together, cultivated together, friends, and even Dao companions. We don't seem to be affected? Meng Qi looked at Yin Xian and then pointed at herself. She only felt that the voice was quite strange, but she would never be bewitched by him to do anything. Red Lotus of Hellfire. Yin Xian and Meng Qi almost blurted out. Even Sikong Xing's gaze was a little dazed. Only the two of them were not affected at all. Was it because of the Red Lotus of Hellfire? Spell. Bewitchment? Meng Qi frowned slightly and reached out to put her hand on Sikong Xing's wrist. She frowned slightly, looked around, suddenly squatted down, and pulled out a few stalks of grass. Oh! Meng Qi cried out. We were careless. She flicked her finger, and the 5-spirit cauldron floated above her head. That voice sounded in their ears again. Little friend, why do you care about them? Have you forgotten what they were going to do to you just now? You can go to the next level on your own. Little friend, that person said earnestly, don't forget, these guys are all your opponents. Chapter 152. What is this? Yin Xian leaned over to look at the grass in Meng Qi's hand. The grass was dark green, a bit darker than normal grass. It wasn't very conspicuous when mixed in the grass, but after being sniffed, it was very obvious. This is drunken dragon grass. Meng Qi said as she leaned over and pulled out a few more pieces. She brought it to her nose and sniffed it, then handed a piece of drunken dragon grass to Yin Xian. Yin Xian also followed her and sniffed it. When the grass that didn't look very special came close, He smelled a strong smell of alcohol. What a strong smell of wine. Yan Xian looked at the drunken dragon grass. No wonder it's called this, even dragons can get drunk from it. Meng Qi glanced at him. Now she knew why Yan Xian wasn't affected. Drunken dragon grass wasn't like normal wine. Drinking too much of it would make people delirious. Drunken dragon grass intoxicated the consciousness of Xiuzha, so normal people would be fine when they smelled it. Yan Xian was also a Xiuzha, but after his inner core was injured, his cultivation was only equivalent to a Lianqi Xiuzha, a bit better than normal people. The effect of drunken dragon grass on him was less. As for Meng Qi, when she was in the swamp, poisonous gas and miasma were everywhere. She took a dan that could suppress hundreds of poisons. The effect of the dan hadn't worn off yet, so she wasn't affected. When Meng Qi thought of this, she pulled over Xing and stuffed a dan into her mouth. She lifted her chin slightly and looked forward. Among those Xiuzha, among her good friends, Li Che was also a medical Xiuzha, but the other clearly hadn't reacted yet. After all, drunken dragon grass was very rare. It didn't look much different from normal grass, and the smell was very faint. Only by inhaling enough of drunken dragon grass for a long enough time would one be affected. Li Che was standing unsteadily in the middle of his fellow disciples. The disciples of Tsonglang Academy always had a harmonious relationship, and he was also a medical Xiuzha, so he didn't have much enmity with others. At this time, several people were standing in the crowd. Although they were also affected, it was not enough for them to make a move. "Let's go," Meng Qi said, pulling Xing and walking quickly towards Li Che with Yan Xian. She also stuffed an antidote pill into Li Che's mouth. Not long after, Xing's wobbly body steadied itself, and his gaze gradually became clear. "Meng Qi." She shook her head and looked at her friend. What happened just now?" She suddenly widened her eyes in shock. Some of the Xiuzha of the large sects on the grasslands had already started to move. Some of them were from the same sect who had conflicts with each other in the past. Perhaps it was originally a small matter, but right now, they were in the 10 Extremes mountain. Everyone knew that as long as they left this place, no one would remember what had happened. Coupled with the fact that the drunken dragon grass had bewitched his divine sense, the little bit of ruthlessness that was usually forcefully suppressed in his body surfaced. Quite a few people had already been killed in an instant. Xing's beautiful eyes widened. "What's wrong with them?" Just as she finished speaking, there was a long scream. A Xiuzha was heavily hit in the chest by a fellow sect member, wearing robes of the same color. That Xiuzha's scream had not stopped, and he spat out a large mouthful of blood. When the blood landed on the grass around him suddenly started to furiously grow. Meng Qi frowned and said, "If the drunken dragon grass is watered with fresh blood, it will grow much faster, and its medicinal effects will greatly increase." "I really seem to smell it, such a strong smell of alcohol," Xing murmured. It wasn't just her, Yan Xian also smelled it. At this time, more and more Xiuzha were injured, and the smell of alcohol in the air became even stronger. Just now, they had needed to bring the drunken dragon grass close to their noses to smell it. Now just by standing there, they could smell bursts of the gradually increasing fragrance of alcohol coming from all directions. Elegant, right? Li Che slowly woke up at this time. He naturally also smelled the extremely strong fragrance of alcohol that spread through the grasslands. This is... The bitter taste of the dan that Meng Qi had given him still lingered in his mouth. "Is this spirit cleansing dan?" "Oh." Meng Qi nodded. "Drunken dragon grass?" Li Che's expression became stern. The smell of alcohol on the grasslands was so strong that he could not ignore it. The stronger the smell of the drunken dragon grass, the more frenzied those Xiuzha attacked. Li Che and Xing exchanged a look, and saw hints of shock in each other's eyes. "It's drunken dragon grass," Meng Qi said in a deep voice. "Spirit cleansing dan can suppress hundreds of poisons, but it is not easy to make, right?" Li Che said. "And I only have 12. Meng Qi sighed lightly. This dan used spirit cleansing grass as the main ingredient, but it could suppress hundreds of poisons. There were many ling herbs added, and it was very time-consuming to make. Meng Qi only had 12. She had taken one in the bog before, and had just given one each to Si Kongxing and Li Che. She took out 2 more to give to Li Che so that he could go save his sect members. Many thanks. Li Che bowed towards Meng Qi. Since it is drunken dragon grass, I have some snow listening grass here. Maybe there is no need to use spirit cleansing Dan. Meng Qi glanced at him. She bent down, parted the grass, and plucked a little white flower from the grass. This is a little ghost orchid. Li Che took the little white flower, and his expression became even more serious. The little white flower was only the size of a fingernail. It was inconspicuous, growing in the grass like a normal little wildflower. Now that he held it closer, he saw it clearly. Although the little white flower was small, when its 4 petals spread out, it looked like a child making a face. It really was a little ghost orchid. Meng Qi took a deep breath and said, "Drunken dragon grass is not hard to cure. Snow listening grass is enough. But when the snow listening grass encounters this little ghost orchid, the poison will enter the body. Even the spirit seawall of a Dongshu expert will be eroded. Then the poison will be hard to cure." That's right. Li Che sighed softly and gave 2 spirit cleansing Dan to his sect members. Look, the person who planted this drunken dragon grass had already calculated this. If they wanted to save people now, they only needed to inhale the medicinal energy of the snow listening grass. But these Xiuzha had already inhaled the fragrance of the little ghost orchid for so long. With the addition of the snow listening grass, the drunken dragon grass was cured, but the poison was deeper. Li Che's expression also showed helplessness. At this time, they really needed a Dan like spirit cleansing Dan. But, he slightly raised his head to look at the sky, but in his mind he kept recalling the medical books he had read. Yin Xian, on the other hand, was rather calm. He just quietly stood beside Meng Qi. Meng Qi had already found Chu Tianfeng and Qin Xiuma in the crowd, but these 2 were also deeply involved in the chaotic battle. With the cultivation of her and her little companions, it was impossible for them to charge through the fighting Xiuzha and safely reach the 2 people's side. She looked around again, only to see Pei Mufeng sitting cross-legged on the grass. His natal longsword floated above his head, protecting him and his 2 sect members within the sword light. "You guys stay here. I'll go to Pavilion Master Pei," Meng Qi said. "Meng Qi, I'll go with you." Si Kongxing put 2 fingers on her right hand together, and a ball of black water protected her and Meng Qi in the center. "Let's go." Si Kongxing was also a decisive person. Immediately, the 2 of them rushed towards Pei Mufeng. They didn't dare to rush through the chaotic crowd, so they circled around the edge of the crowd and circled in front of the 3 people from Falling Star Pavilion. Of the 2 sect members behind Pei Mufeng, one was Su Zijuan, who had entered Falling Star Sea with him. Pavilion Master Pei. Meng Qi held a medicinal pill in her hand, and quickly sent it into Pei Mufeng's mouth. Pei Mufeng didn't doubt it at all, opening his mouth and swallowing the pill. Meng Qi took out 2 more medicinal pills, and gave one each to Su Zijuan and the other Falling Star Pavilion disciple. Of the 12 medicinal pills, only 4 were left. Meng Qi turned back to look at the fighting Xiuzha. When Pei Mufeng also stood up, she immediately said, "Pavilion Master Pei, my 2 friends are still inside, please. Let's go." Pei Mufeng's finger pointed, and his life bond long sword opened a path in front of him. He was already very strong, and after training in Falling Star Sea for the past few months, his swordsmanship had improved. His life bond long sword suddenly flew out, as fast as the wind, so fast that people couldn't even see the shadow of the sword clearly. With his protection, Meng Qi and the others didn't spend much effort to safely rush to Chu Tianfeng's side. Pei Mufeng swung his sword twice, and forced back the Xiuzha who was fighting with Chu Tianfeng. Chu Tianfeng. Meng Qi quickly walked forward, and stuffed a clear wind pill into his mouth. Chu Tianfeng wasn't injured, but his clothes and cheeks were splattered with blood. He swallowed the medicinal pill, and his eyes became clear after a while. "Meng Qi." He exhaled, and looked in disbelief at Meng Qi standing in front of him. His life bond talisman was a red lotus-like talisman, and it was still floating by his side. What happened to us?" Chu Tianfeng exclaimed. "Such a strong smell of alcohol." "Let's talk later," Meng Qi said. They charged in the direction of Qin Xiaoma. With Chu Tianfeng in the group, it was much easier and faster than before. After a while, Meng Qi gave Qin Xiaoma a clear spirit pill. They immediately charged out of the chaotic battle and returned to Li Chei's side. At this time, Su Zijuan and Pei Mufeng's other sect member had arrived. The smell of alcohol on the grasslands was so strong it was intoxicating. Li Chei was still looking into the distance, muttering, "So what is going on?" Chu Tianfeng wiped away the blood on his face and asked angrily, "Is this purposefully provoking us to fight?" Once they left, they would forget what had happened in 10 Extreme Mountain. It was equivalent to a chaotic place without any morals or rules. The drunken dragon grass that could enchant Xiozha's consciousness caused them to lose control over themselves. Adding on the fact that the person had used some kind of bewitching technique to tempt them, most people could not control themselves. A few of them had already withdrawn from the battle, but the others were still engaged in a chaotic battle. If this continued, they would probably kill until their eyes were red, and they would not rest until they were dead. Qin Xiaoma turned to look at Yan Xian and asked coldly, 10 Extreme Mountain only opens once every 100 years for disciples of other sects to enter. When it opens every 10 years, only your sect's disciples can enter. Even if you do not know what happened here, is there 1/3 of the disciples that can leave alive each time? Yan Xian and Qin Xiaoma exchanged a look and said, "Yes." He paused, and then continued, "If more than half of the disciples that entered each time died, my mirror moon sky would have collapsed long ago. This is... Oh." At this time, another voice sounded beside everyone. The young man who suddenly appeared held his breath halfway. "Drunken dragon grass?" He looked at Meng Qi and his eyes were full of surprise. "You guys, it's drunken dragon grass." Meng Qi nodded. The person who came was Xue Qingxian. He had already gone to the second trial, so he must have passed the second trial and came out again. He was the most outstanding disciple of the Wind Alliance. Once he smelled the alcohol and saw the chaotic scene, he immediately guessed most of what happened. "I have some snow listening grass here, maybe?" Xue Qingxian spoke halfway and bent down to pick a small ghost orchid. "Small ghost orchid?" "It's a small ghost orchid," Meng Qi said. "This," Xue Qingxian murmured. "If the small ghost orchid is added with snow listening grass, the poison will be very powerful." "Yes." Meng Qi nodded. She was also quickly thinking about what other ways to detoxify the drunken dragon grass besides snow listening grass. "Little friend." The voice that was silent for a while suddenly sounded again. "Since you've already saved your friends, you should leave quickly. What does the life and death of others have to do with you? Don't forget that these people are your next opponents." Li Chei was still looking up at the sky, muttering. Xue Qingxian was silent, and his expression was quite serious. Meng Qi withdrew her divine sense. The bamboo slip that Lin Yan gave her was emitting a faint light, and the contents of the bamboo slip were quickly imprinted in her eyes. The three of them seemed to have not heard the voice at all, and they were completely lost in thought. Qin Xiaoma and Chu Tianfeng looked at each other. The two of them stood on the left and right, and their life-bound magic treasures and long swords floated beside them. They were really not surprised at all that Meng Qi would be like this. Not only Meng Qi, but the three medical cultivators were really... The two of them did not know how to describe it. Forget about Li Chei, they had always heard of Xue Qingxian. As the eldest son of the Wind Alliance's Xue family, almost everyone recognized him as the future leader of the Wind Alliance, and the head of the Xue family. Xue Qingxian was an accident most of the time, except for that time in the Fallen Star Sea, when he had thrown away many concerns and completely let go, then fought side by side with them. Most of the time, Xue Qingxian would put the interests of his family first. But now he clearly had a great advantage and could completely ignore these people and continue to maintain his advantage. The expression on his face was exactly the same as Meng Qi and Li Chei's. Qin Xiaoma and Chu Tianfeng looked at each other again. This group of people was really... There's a way. Meng Qi suddenly flicked her finger, and a sparkling jade slip appeared in front of her. "This is the jade slip that I got in the Fallen Star Sea last time," she said. A medical manual left behind by a senior who died in the fallen star sea. Mengqi pointed her finger at the jade slip, and a line of words flew out of the jade slip and quickly circled around Li Che and the others. In addition to snow listening grass, drunken dragon grass can also be cured with little ghost orchids. Mengqi was a little surprised, but also not very surprised. Everything in the world reinforced and countered each other. So she looked around. The grassland was dotted with little white flowers, and there were many little ghost orchids here. In other words, an ancient senior who planted this drunken dragon grass had actually left something to cure the poison of drunken dragon grass. In the medical books of later generations, there were very few mentions of little ghost orchids being able to cure drunken dragon grass poison. Mengqi, Li Che, and Xue Qingxian looked at each other. Together with the other two disciples of the Surging Waves Academy, they waved their right hands, and medicine knives were already in their hands. Medical cultivators may have different life-bound magic treasures, but almost everyone had a medicine knife. Immediately, they worked together to dig up the little ghost orchids by the roots. It was recorded in the medical notes that if you wrung out the sap from the roots of the little ghost orchids and slapped it on the foreheads of people poisoned by drunken dragon grass, it could cure the poison. It was not hard to say, but there were so many Xiuzha poisoned here, and it was a chaotic battle. It would take too much time to treat them one by one. I bought a talisman before. Mengqi raised her hand to summon her 5-spirit cauldron, and motioned for the others to throw the roots of the little ghost orchids they dug up into her 5-spirit cauldron. She flicked out a few more ling stones. The roots of the little ghost orchids in the 5-spirit cauldron were refined into a ball of green liquid in just a few moments. Mengqi took out the Heavenly Sea Pavilion talisman she had bought before from her storage bag. That talisman could mix poison into rainwater. It would not only increase the effectiveness of the poison, but also increase the range of the poison. This can be used right now, she said joyfully. I'll go first. I hadn't thought that this talisman could be used like this. Yan Xian looked at Mengqi with a slightly complicated expression. He had been listening from the side. He had thought that Mengqi and the others were going to save them one by one after refining the medicine. Although that would be a little slower, they could decide who to save and who not to save. He did not expect that she was going to use such a talisman. Was she going to save everyone regardless of the difference? Ha! Li Che leaned over curiously. There's such a talisman? Where did you buy it? I'm going to buy one too. With it, it will be much more convenient for us to encounter the miasma outbreak in the southern land every few years. It's from the Heavenly Sea Pavilion in the heavens beyond heaven, Mengqi said. Right. This is quite useful. As she spoke, she had already neatly sent the medicinal liquid refined from the roots of the little ghost orchids into the talisman. Mengqi tapped lightly with her finger, and spiritual energy was sent into the talisman. In just a moment, rain fell from the sky. On the grassland that was originally filled with the smell of alcohol, the air seemed to have been cleansed and became fresh again. The eyes of the cultivators who were fighting in a frenzy gradually became clear. It was unknown who started it first, but they slowly stopped fighting. The sound of weapons clashing gradually became softer. In the end, only the sound of the rain falling and hitting the grass could be heard. Between heaven and earth, there was silence. Chapter 153. The soul-tethered talismans and soul-tethered longswords floating in the air disappeared one by one. The Xiuzha that had been fighting until their eyes were red panting as they stood on the grass, looking at each other. Most of them had been in the same sect before entering 10 Extremes Mountain. Usually they were brothers, and the sect was peaceful. But just a moment ago, everyone wanted nothing more than to kill the other party. Actually, thinking back, that person didn't say anything. But everyone knew that after leaving 10 Extremes Mountain, everything that happened here would be forgotten. As long as you could leave alive, no one would know if you stepped on the corpses of your fellow sect members to advance. Because of this, everyone forgot etiquette, justice, honor, and the friendship of fellow sect members. That seemed not right. At this time, the people standing on the grass were basically the young disciples of the 10 great sects of the 3,000 worlds in 4 Jia, and the most outstanding ones. They looked dazedly at each other, feeling that something wasn't right. Even though they knew the situation in 10 Extremes Mountain was like this, but many people asked themselves, they never thought they would attack fellow sect members. Just now, they really couldn't control themselves at all. Like their bodies weren't controlled by their consciousness at all. At this time, even though the poison of the drunken dragon grass had been cured, almost half of the Xiozha were injured. Drip, drip, drip. Blood from the wounds on someone's arm flowed down their fingers and dripped onto the grass. Some people's backs were wet, the smell of blood spread, their hands and feet were cold as if they would collapse in the next second. Some Xiozha were injured by fellow sect members, and were familiar with the internal and external wounds on their bodies. None of them moved. They just stood there, as if whoever spoke first would lose. Meng Qi, Li Che and the others were squatting on the ground, the medicine knife still held horizontally in their hands. Her left hand held a small bag. Inside was a lot of drunken dragon grass. It wasn't that this grass didn't exist in the 3,000 worlds, but it wasn't as good as the ones in 10 Extremes Mountain. Li Che was doing a similar thing. Other than this, the two had also collected a big bag of small ghost orchids. Small ghost orchids were much less seen. Meng Qi had seen them in books before. The best quality small ghost orchids had vermilion red fruits that were as small as pearls on their roots. When they dug out the little ghost orchid's rhizome, the vermilion fruits on it were as bright and cute as coral pearls. I have enough. Li Che put the small medicine pouch into his storage pouch. He looked at Meng Qi and said, "These little ghost orchids are different from the ones in the 3,000 worlds. Almost all the little ghost orchids in our world are from the south. We've planted some in our sect, but none of the fruits are as red as this." "Really?" Meng Qi directly dug out a complete little ghost orchid and put it into a small jade box along with the soil on the roots. "Then I'll take one out and see if I can raise it." Qin Xioma and Chu Tianfeng stood side by side beside Meng Qi. At the same time, they were also vigilantly watching the practitioners who had woken up. These people had just entered the 10 Extremes Mountain not long ago. Obviously, they had not recovered from the shock of suddenly falling out with their fellow disciples and good friends. At this time, they were still standing in the same place in a daze. No one paid much attention to Meng Qi and the others. The two of them looked at each other. Qin Xioma was certain that even if something really happened, they had him, Chu Tianfeng, Si Gongxing, the three people from Falling Star Pavilion, Meng Qi and Li Che. Even if Xue Chengxian did not help them, they still had the power to fight. "Are you done?" Qin Xioma bent down slightly and asked Meng Qi. "Yes." Meng Qi put the jade box into her storage pouch and stood up. She looked around and saw the Xiozha had regained their clarity. At this time, most of the people's gazes were somewhat evasive. The entire grassland was awkward and quiet. Instead, no one continued to enter the next stage. Meng Qi and Qin Xioma looked at each other. The other nodded slightly at her and then blinked quickly. She was stunned. Before she understood Qin Xioma's meaning, she saw the black-robed man take a step forward and suddenly said loudly, "Fellow Taoists, please pay the medical fees." Meng Qi, Li Che, Xue Chengxian. The three of them stood side by side. Li Che and Xue Chengxian both looked at Meng Qi. Meng Qi's head was also full of question marks. To be honest, her head was still full of whether this little ghost orchid could be brought out of the 10 Extremes Mountain alive, and where to plant it in the future. She had not thought of this step yet. Moreover, the person who said this was Qin Xioma. Meng Qi could not help but swallow her saliva. She had already vaguely guessed that Qin Xioma should know something, or even remember something. That was why he had been following her this time, and did not pay much attention to Lu Qingran. However, Meng Qi's deepest impression of him was that in her previous life, he was the sect master of the Cloud Peak who later stirred up a storm of blood in the southern land. It was the little demon lord who only knew how to be gentle to Lu Qingran, and did not trust anyone else. At this moment, the awkward atmosphere on the resting ground disappeared in an instant. All the Xiozha looked in this direction. Most of them still had some confusion in their eyes. Chu Tianfeng took a step forward. His burning sky palace had a unique technique that could record some of the things that happened. In the past, he had shown Mengqi the image of an elder of his sect going deep into the Yao realm and invading the Yao Lord's territory. His avatar was directly killed. Chu Tianfeng could not be like the elder of his sect and use his avatar to send the image back to the sect across 2 realms. However, it was not difficult for him to just record what had just happened. Chu Tianfeng raised the index and middle fingers of his right hand and pointed towards the air. The radiance of spirit qi flickered, and a spirit qi screen appeared in the air. On it, a complete record of what had just happened quickly appeared. Even though there was no sound, he was standing next to Mengqi. They had fallen into the chaos of killing each other, then Mengqi and the others picking herbs, making medicine, using talismans to save people. Until they regained consciousness, everything was recorded clearly. The Xiuzha had been confused by the drunken dragon grass and the person from 10 Extremes Mountain. Originally, if they did not kill until their Ling energy was exhausted, it would be hard for them to stop. At that time, at least half of the Xiuzha here would fall. Even if they did not die, they would not be able to continue climbing 10 Extremes Mountain. However, right now everyone could still stand. Even though there were many Xiuzha who were injured, their injuries were not serious. It was not a problem to continue after bandaging them. The speed of Chu Tianfeng's demonstration of the technique was much faster than the actual time. In order to let everyone see clearly, he had already repeated it twice in this short period of time. This time, the Xiuzha's gaze all fell on the faces of Mengqi and the others. How many spirit stones? Qin Xioma turned around to look at Mengqi. Mengqi looked at him in a daze. The handsome young man had a serious expression. In his deep eyes, she could see her own small shadow. Even Mengqi could feel the Ling energy fluctuation on Qin Xioma's body. It was obvious that he was about to reach the peak of a major realm and was overflowing with Ling energy. He could pass the tribulation at any time and step into the next major realm. Mengqi raised his eyebrows, smiled slightly and said, "1 Xian spirit stone." Chu Tianfeng couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Looking at it this way, he was still the cheapest. Really, he did not know whether to be happy or not. However, he quickly walked towards those Xiuzha with Qin Xioma. 1 Xian spirit stone per person. Chu Tianfeng's expression was also very serious. For these Xiuzha who could enter the 10 Extremes Mountain, the sect would prepare some things for them before they came. Talismans, spirit stones, medicinal pills, and naturally, some natural treasures that could save their lives. 1 Xian spirit stone was still something they could take out. Moreover, Chu Tianfeng had just played what happened 2 times in front of everyone. Those medical Xiuzha had saved them. It was not an exaggeration to say that they had saved their lives. It was only 1 Xian spirit stone. No one planned to renege on this debt in front of so many people. Qin Xioma and Qin Xioma circled around and quickly returned to Mengqi's side with 2 small bags of spirit stones. Chu Tianfeng did not even let off his fellow disciples from the Burning Sky Palace. He took 1 Xian spirit stone from each of them. Here. He handed the bag to Mengqi. There are probably 70 to 80 of them. Mn. Mengqi immediately divided the Xian spirit stones into 5 portions. Li Che, Xueqing Xian, the 2 disciples from the Surging Waves Academy, and herself each had 1. No need, no need. Li Che waved his hand. Their Surging Waves Academy naturally could not compare to the rich and overbearing Subleague. However, Mengqi had first cured him and his fellow disciples of the poison. Afterwards, it was also her idea. Helping them gather the herbs was just a small matter. No matter what, he could not take these Xian spirit stones. You don't have to give it to me. Take it. Mengqi said. Our rule is that those who work together will split it equally. She smiled at Li Che. It was the same in the Starfall Sea. Take it, Si Kongxing also said. Mengqi is giving it to you. Just take it. Then many thanks. Li Che put the spirit stones into his storage brocade pouch. This time, his master had prepared many things for him in the 10 Extremes Mountain. He did not lack spirit stones. However, Qin Xioma and the others had collected more than 80 Xian spirit stones. Divided among the 5 of them, each person would get more than 10 Xian spirit stones. To Li Che, this was not a small amount of wealth. His fellow disciples were the same. When they saw Li Che accept the spirit stones, they also followed. These 2 disciples from the Surging Waves Academy usually did some sect missions, and at most, they would be rewarded with 4th or 5th grade spirit stones. Even if they found some rare herbs and handed them over to the sect, they would be rewarded with 7th or 8th grade spirit stones at most. 9th grade spirit stones were already very rare to them. At this time they were suddenly given more than 10 Xian spirit stones. This was something that no one dared to think about. Li Che's 2 fellow disciples could not help but seriously size up Meng Qi. This young medical cultivator called Meng Qi was really generous. They did not particularly care about spirit stones, but only with spirit stones could they have spirit herbs and spirit flowers, better pill cauldrons and pills. Meng Qi. As the eldest son of the Wind Alliance's Shui family, Shui Qingxian was the calmest. Did you all pass the second test? Meng Qi and the others all shook their heads. Shui Qingxian pondered for a moment and asked, Qi, what was your first test? A swamp filled with poisonous miasma. Meng Qi said. Me too. Li Che said. There are a lot of poisonous insects. It's very similar to the Great Poison Swamp in the southern border. You know Meng Qi? It's the swamp that has a great poison every 2 years. Are you stupid? Before Meng Qi could speak, Si Gongxing laughed first. Meng Qi has never been to the southern border. How would she know? That's right. Li Che smiled shyly and said embarrassedly, I always feel like I've known Meng Qi for a long time. Sorry, I forgot that you've never been to the southern border. Meng Qi's heart skipped a beat. She had indeed been to the Great Poison Swamp in the southern border, but that was in her previous life. Moreover, she had met Li Che there. At that time, Li Che had fainted inside, and was dragged out of the swamp by her. Later, she had spent a lot of effort to detoxify him. Later, Meng Qi frowned. Later, the guy who had betrayed Qin Xiaoma had put up a notice to seek medical treatment for his wife's pregnancy. Out of curiosity, she saw that Li Che's poison had been detoxified, and that he was fine. He only needed to rest for 2 days. Therefore, Meng Qi gave some spirit stones to the inn-waiter, and asked him to take care of Li Che. Then, she went to that guy's residence to treat his wife. Therefore Li Che also. Meng Qi looked at Li Che. The other party's eyes looked so clear. He smiled embarrassedly at her and said, I'm completely confused. Maybe it's because we fought side by side in the Fallen Star Sea before, so I got confused. Meng Qi shook her head. I also encountered a swamp. A disciple of the Surging Waves Academy hurriedly said. Me too. Another disciple also raised his hand. I asked little sister. She also encountered a swamp. Shui Qingxian said. So it seems that the first stage that we medical cultivators encounter should be similar. Mine was a forest. There were poisonous insects and snakes in it. Chu Tianfeng said. I burned it with fire. Mine was a snow wolf. Qin Xiaoma said. Fierce eagle. Pei Mufeng also said. Mine was also poisonous insects and snakes. I formed a black water shield and went through it. Si Gongxing said. It seems that the second stage that you're going to face in the Qi. Wait a minute. Chu Tianfeng suddenly interrupted Shui Qingxian loudly. Qi, are you familiar with Meng Qi? More familiar than us. Shui Qingxian looked into Meng Qi's eyes and smiled slightly. I was rude, Meng Qi. He learned from Si Gongxing and the others how to address Meng Qi, and his tone was even gentler than before. The second stage is full of spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs. You only need to identify them and follow the non-poisonous flowers and plants. You'll come out soon. Shui Qingxian said softly. You'll be fine. I'll wait for you here. Chu Tianfeng. F*CK. Did Shui Qingxian take the wrong medicine? He looked at the eldest son of the Shui family of the Wind Alliance warily. The index and middle fingers of his right hand, which were hanging by his side, were pressed together, ready to rush out at any time. He suddenly remembered that this guy's sister had said that the elders of the Shui family wanted Shui Qingxian to marry Meng Qi. It could be said that she passed the apricot forest competition's barrier test in front of all the medical cultivators in the world. and received the approval of their ancient mystic realm great doctor, Lin Yan. Based on this, the Shui family hoped that their future family head could marry Meng Qi. So, Chu Tianfeng became more and more vigilant. So this Shui Qingxian planned to listen to the elders of the Shui family and start to have ideas about Meng Qi. Don't even think about it. If he didn't pass this test, don't even think about touching Meng Qi. Hey. Chu Tianfeng suddenly took a step forward and firmly stood between Meng Qi and Shui Qingxian, separating the two without any trace of politeness. You'd better take care of your sister first. I'll wait here for Meng Qi. I don't need to worry about my sister. Meng Qi is not weaker than your sister, so she doesn't need to worry about you, Chu Tianfeng said coldly. Shui Qingxian smiled and didn't continue to argue with him. Meng Qi. He took out a roll of bamboo slips from his storage bag and handed it to Meng Qi with Chu Tianfeng between them. This is the Shui family's 100 herbs scripture. I can't make the decision to show you the Wind Alliance's scripture, but I can give you the Shui family's scripture first. He paused and said, but after we leave here, I might be able to take you to the Wind Alliance's library pavilion. You have the medical letter of the senior in the Starfall Sea. Although you can't exchange it for the strongest medical skills in the Wind Alliance, the 100 herb scripture should be fine. Really? Meng Qi's eyes lit up. Of course. In fact, if you're still willing to join the Wind Alliance, you can use the medical letter to exchange for access to the 7th floor of the library pavilion. Shui Qingxian smiled and said, but this depends on you. If you're not willing, you can directly use the medical letter to exchange for some medical books. Oh. Meng Qi had already walked out from behind Chu Tianfeng and took the bamboo slips from Shui Qingxuan's hands. She rummaged through her storage brocade pouch. Fellow Taoist Shui originally had a copy of the medical letter she obtained from the Starfall Sea. He could have read it at any time. It was just that he and Li Che had agreed to leave it with her first. As for the others, Meng Qi looked through them and finally took out a magic weapon. She said, this is a level 6 magic weapon. I'll give it to you. She paused and explained. There's a sword technique on it that can be activated with spirit energy. It's equivalent to a sword strike from an insightful emptiness realm sword cultivator. It's quite useful for us. Okay. Shui Qingxian took it with a smile and carefully put it away. In Meng Qi's eyes, the Shui family's 100 herb scripture was far more valuable than this level 6 magic weapon. She thought for a moment and took out another bamboo slip. She said, I organized this myself. It's the demon world's 100 herb scripture. The Shui family definitely has better ones, but I've read a lot of unofficial history books. Maybe I can help a little. Meng Qi wasn't talking nonsense. The records about the demon world and the demon world in the Book House of Heaven and Earth were far more abundant than those in the Trichiliocosm. Okay. Shui Qingxuan's eyes curved slightly. He took the jade slip and said gently, it just so happens that I'm quite interested in the demon world's herbs. We can discuss it later. BQGXSYDW. He paused and said, be careful. Okay. Meng Qi nodded. I will. Fellow Taoist Shui, you don't have to wait for me here. You can go to the next level first. She said, we'll meet on the 10 Extremes mountain. Did you hear that? Chu Tianfeng was still angry, but he immediately cheered up. She said you don't have to wait. We'll meet on the 10 Extremes mountain. As he spoke, he pulled Meng Qi behind him again, telling her to stay away from this Shui Qingxian. Okay. Shui Qingxian nodded. I'll go to the 3rd level first to see what's going on. He cupped his hands toward the crowd and turned to walk toward the border of the grassland. Meng Qi. Seeing him leave, Chu Tianfeng immediately pulled Meng Qi and lectured her. Stay away from him. This person has bad intentions toward you. Bad intentions? Meng Qi frowned. Yes. Chu Tianfeng snorted coldly. The Shui family took a fancy to your performance in the apricot forest and wanted this guy to trick you. He wants to become your Dao companion, but he's not sincere to you. He's just doing it for the family and the sect. He wants to use you. Can't you see that? Fellow Taoist Shui wants to become my Dao companion. Meng Qi froze and quickly shook her head decisively. That's impossible. Why is it impossible? Chu Tianfeng was so angry that he almost laughed. Even his younger sister said that this guy has bad intentions. Come on, let me tell you. A person like him was raised as an heir by the Wind Alliance, and the education he received since childhood is different from yours. He doesn't love his future Dao companion at all as long as that person is useful to his family. Chu Tianfeng turned his head and pulled Qin Xioma over to help him. You tell Meng Qi that men don't care about anything for power, status, and strength. It's not difficult to become Dao companions with someone you don't love, right? Qin Xioma looked at him deeply and said, Meng Qi, Chu Tianfeng is right. But that's impossible. Meng Qi said. Fellow Daoist Shui and I can't. Why not? Chu Tianfeng said, what if he's despicable and shameless and does something to you? Because I already have a Dao companion. Meng Qi interrupted him and said clearly, each cultivator in the 3,000 worlds can only have one Dao companion, right? Therefore, fellow Daoist Shui and I can never become Dao companions. She came to a conclusion. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.